obviously, if we have the ability to find him a place that he desires, that's something we're going to try to do. But, if not, then he'll have to be a part of our club moving forward. And I think he understands that. I think, again, we have a lot of time left. We'll see how things shake out over the next 3 to 6 weeks. But a lot of time, and just have to remind ourselves that there is that time.
Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. The voice you just heard, of course, is John Mozeliak, the Cardinals president of baseball operations, for one more year. And Alex, he was on KMOX. That is him on the Sunday morning show, Sports on a Sunday Morning, talking about the latest update with Nolan Arenado. There have been a couple of updates since then. One from Katie Woo, another from John Denton. They are correlated, but not exactly the same. Let me first get you excited, Alex. This one comes from John Denton of MLB.com.
Look, man, I don't like to get excited and then get shot back down.
Well, that's exactly what I'm about to do. I'm just going to warn you ahead of time.
Then get excited.
Because I had this experience of reading John Denton's story last night and then Katie Woo's story this morning. And again, they're similar, but not the same at all. No. So here's John Denton's version. The Red Sox have emerged as a strong candidate to land Nolan Arenado via a trade from the Cardinals, according to a source to MLB.com.
High five, T-Bone. Boston
could be close to pulling out of the sweepstakes for free agent third baseman Alex Bregman, who could potentially command a deal worth $200 million. A Cardinals-Red Sox swap could be contingent on St. Louis swallowing a, quote, sizable chunk, end quote, of the money still owed to the third baseman and Boston's ability to deal first baseman Tristan Casas. So that is what I read last night. That is John Denton's report.
What was your reaction? Were you just like high-fiving Luca?
Yeah!
Luca! He's going to Boston!
That was my original report.
Way to go, Johnny
my
D.
original reaction. T-Bone, was similar?
Yeah, it was kind of like that, yeah.
I was chanting at home, Big D, Big D, John.
Do you just call everybody that has a name that starts with D, Big D?
If you're big and you got a D as your first or last name, then yes.
Okay. Fair enough. Then
Could change my name to Dylan.
I read Lil D. Sorry, man.
Lil D, Lil T, Lil T, Lil T.
Start a rap career.
Not the same.
Here's Katie Woo's version. The Cardinals' efforts to trade Nolan Arenado are at a standstill, which has stalled their offseason plans.
More like
Trading him was previously categorized as a top priority for the club, and being unable to do so would have severe ramifications for the 2025 season. So,
more like Katie Boo, am I right?
She then continues. Several teams have inquired about Arenado. The number of Arenado's preferred destinations is small, and it is unclear if any of those teams are interested in him. The Dodgers were long believed to be the top choice for the Southern California native, but they were not engaged in Arenado talks at all this winter. The New York Yankees checked in, and I found this note to be interesting, and balked at the Cardinals' price point. It remains to be seen if the Boston Red Sox are true players for Arenado as they remain in play for free agent third baseman Alex Bregman. The Cardinals will continue to monitor Bregman, who has also been connected to the Tigers and the Blue Jays. Multiple league sources indicate that the Red Sox represent Arenado's last chance to be dealt before the 2025 season. If Boston misses on Bregman, it could pivot to trading for Arenado. However, that move would also be contingent on moving Rafael Devers to first base. It remains unclear, according to Katie Woo, if Boston would be willing to take on most of Arenado's salary. All right, so that's where things stand today. You heard the update from John Mozeliak on Sunday. You heard the update from John Denton. That was from last night on MLB.com. Then we read the update from Katie Woo over at The Athletic. You should read her full piece. There's a lot more details in there, but that was the important stuff that we got to do as the basis for our conversation today. Alex, how you feeling about the Cardinals? Because to me, the entire offseason comes down to their ability to trade Nolan Arenado, and I am leaking confidence on their ability to trade Nolan Arenado right now.
Leaking? This is like the Titanic right now. There's a big hole that's not getting filled. The water's pouring out.
That's an iceberg, and I can see a part of it.
Yeah.
The rest of it, I know. I learned this in the movie. The majority of the iceberg is underwater, and I can't see it, and that's problematic.
That's
to
true.
me.
It's very true. And right now, you see that iceberg, and it I mean, this isn't just the entire Cardinals off season. This is the entire Cardinals season. Like, this was supposed to be a refresh. This was supposed to be a reset.
Brought to you by Febreze.
And it's not happening. Right now, it stank still. Because if you have Nolan Arenado, look at the trickle-down effect. Well, now Nolan Gorman's not your everyday third baseman, which means Brendan Donovan's not your everyday second baseman, which means you are still going to be searching for consistent playing time every day at bats for a lot of the younger players on your roster. And I got to be honest with you, the decline of Nolan Arenado this past season, if it is truly just age related and he's older and everything is going to start falling off quick, if you can't trade him now, it's not going to get any easier moving forward. There's going to be less teams that he's going to be willing to get traded to, and there's going to be less of those teams that are going to be willing to trade for Nolan Arenado, who continues to decline. So this was their priority number one, and as Craig Button, who just relentlessly tells us, you're the general manager, it's your job to get rid of that player, and you haven't found a way to do it yet.
Yeah, I mean, the whole offseason has circled around him because of what you just said. If you go into next season we're hoping for a youth movement and you have Nolan Arenado, you can't accomplish that. You can't accomplish a youth movement and set things up kind of perfectly for Chaim Bloom, right? It's not only about a youth movement, because now it gives, if you can trade Arenado, it gives Chaim Bloom an opportunity to see these guys in everyday roles, and you can finally leave next season, in theory, going, okay, we know what Nolan Gorman is, we know what Jordan Walker is, we know what Lars Nootbaar is, we know what Alec Burleson is, so on and so forth, and then Chaim Bloom can go from there with a fresher book, by the way, with $60 million off of it for multiple seasons, and look at it and go, okay, here's what I think the path forward is for the Cardinals. Well, now it's looking towards, A, you're not going to get some answers on some of these young guys because there's going to be 600 plate appearances clogged up at third base with Arenado, and you're also going to still have that money on the books for when Chaim Bloom takes over. So this is not just a problem for this season. It's a problem for seasons to come for the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, down the road, I don't think it's as much of an issue. I think it's more about the here and now, because it is so important for this refresh to be successful, to get answers this season. That was the whole task of 2025. What about wins and losses? Though Mo likes to say they want to be competitive. It was about, we need to know what this young core is to know if we can push forward here in the next season or two, or if we really need to kind of enter a rebuild, if you want to call it that, because these guys weren't the answers internally.
So here's the thing. If nobody wants Nolan Arenado, I'm not sure what there is that Mo can do. Unless there is one thing he could do. You sweeten the pot. Say, if you take on Nolan Arenado's contract, we will give you this. Whatever this is, whether that be Eric Fetty or Ryan Helsley or a prospect, something like that. Like, that's the next step that the Cardinals are probably going to have to go to if nobody is willing to take on Arenado, especially while the Cardinals don't need a ton of the money in this contract. Is that something you guys are open to? Because I agree, the number one priority for the 2025 season needs to be get these young guys the opportunities that are necessary. It is time to see an everyday role at a specific position for Nolan Gorman. It is time to have Brendan Donovan play somewhere. Just have a role going into opening day that you don't have to squint to figure out, okay, where is he playing on a day-to-day basis? It is time to get opportunities for Thomas and JC, even if they are not every day at one specific spot. It is time to see what Alec Burleson can be. It is time to see what if Lars Nootbaar can stay healthy for a season. And all of these things are contingent on Nolan Arenado not being on the roster, not taking up those 500-plus at-bats at third base. So, if it requires you to sweeten the pot in order to trade his contract, to trade him from the roster, is that something you guys are open to if that is a last-ditch, last-resort effort from Mo?
To me, you just said it. What was the priority this offseason? What did you hold 17 press conferences about? To prioritize your younger players. And it was the number one priority. And guess what? When your number one priority, you can't get it accomplished easily, you got to do something that you don't like to do.
That is a bit of a double-edged sword, though, right? Like, if they have to trade a young player to then get off of the contract from Nolan Arenado.
I get it. Or can you attach a guy that's already on your roster? I know it sucks to have to give up an Eric Fetty with a Nolan Arenado, but what was priority number one for this Cardinals team? What did you say the focus was going to be? Resetting the team and bringing in opportunities for younger players. If Nolan Arenado is here, one of Alec Burleson, Lars Nootbaar, Nolan Gorman, Brendan Donovan gets screwed this season. and you don't know what they are. And then we got to go do a whole nother season of, well, we still don't know what these younger players are. And then when you find out what those younger players are, you can't trade them.
There's a lot of truth in that, what you just said. There's a lot of truth in it. But there's opportunity cost here, too. Like, we don't know what is behind the mystery door that is Eric Fetty, if dealt. Whether that's this offseason, like on his own, if dealt this offseason, or at the deadline. We don't know what the mystery door is behind Ryan Helsley of, if dealt on his own this offseason or at the deadline, what do you get in return there? We do know that door number 3 behind Ryan Helsley is a potential second-round draft pick that the Cardinals could get via the qualifying offer. Like, that's out there. Same thing is potentially true for Eric Fetty. If they were to qualifying offer either of those guys after next season and they walk toward the
What's
market.
more important, though? A future second-round pick that's a qualifying offer?
We don't know.
Or playing time now?
That's what they have to decide.
See, I don't think it's an I don't know. I know that player's not going to help me for at least 3 to 4 years. What I do know is if Nolan Gorman sits his rear end on the bench for half of the season, or if Alec Burleson sits his rear end on the half of the bench this season, now I'm not going to know what these guys are, and now their development is stunted for 1 more year.
Totally fair. That is a perspective on it. That's the decision that has to be made eventually. Like, the hope is Boston strikes out on the Alex Bregman sweepstakes because they're a poor franchise and they can't figure this thing out to be able to go out there and actually sign one of the top free agents.
But yet then we're going to go get Nolan Arenado.
And then they pivot and say, let's go get Nolan Arenado to improve our defense at third base. That's the way that we're going to become a legitimate contender again. You can agree or disagree with their decisions, but that's the plan, right? That's what it looks like. That's what the Cardinals need to happen. It appears Boston is the team. I'm still holding out hope on the Angels because, man, talk about a rudderless franchise that has no idea what they're doing at all times. There was a report today from Ken Rosenthal. They're interested in, like, Santander and, what is it, Pete Alonso, maybe going out there and signing like a Nick Pivetta, who's a qualifying offer guy. Like, none of this makes sense for them, but whatever. God bless you, Angels. Keep doing you. Maybe Arenado still is an option for them. I don't know. Maybe Arenado just says, I don't want to go to the Angels. I am exclusively playing for a contender or the Cardinals, which seems crazy to me, but whatever. This is where we're at, man. Things are not good. Not good at all. And if they have to attach one of those young players or Fetty/Helsley to Arenado, you got to do what you got to do, man. You got to get out of this contract. I'm with you, Alex. I don't like it. It would not be my preferred route of going. But the Cardinals are between a rock and a hard place right now. They stated what their mission was this offseason. They have to accomplish it or they get an F. Because the entire goal for 2025 is based on one move that they ain't made yet. So we'll see if they can make it. Again, a lot of pressure on John Mozeliak to get this thing done.
Why I love when we talk to Craig Button, because when you ask Craig Button, it's like, how tough is this job going to be? He says, well, you're the general manager, so you need to figure it out.
Yep. And there's a way to figure it out, but it just is not going to be popular, and it's not going to be a fun way to do it. It's taking your medicine and seeing how it goes down. All right, in 15 minutes, we'll get into NFL quick hitters. An NFL team that yesterday announced it's bringing back its head coach, today decided they're firing their general manager. We'll talk about what that means for them and for the upcoming NFL draft. That's in 15 minutes. But coming up next, Jeremy Rutherford, Blues Insider, joins us here on BK and Ferrario. Hey, it's BK. It is the start of a new year, which means you're probably trying to get those New Year's resolutions on the right path. And one of those New Year's resolutions for a lot of different people is weight loss goals heading into 2025. Well, they can help you out with that over at Victory Men's Health. Check them out today. They have 4 great locations across the St. Louis area, and they'll find a way to unlock your inner champion. And that means different things for different people. For some, like I said, that might mean some weight loss goals. For others, maybe it's low testosterone that you need to get checked out. The new year is the perfect time to do so. Go over to their website today at victorymenshealth.com. Super easy process to do. If you go to the website, on the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a tab that says Book Now. Click on that, put in your name, email, phone number, tell them BK with 101 ESPN sent you, and then you can tell them a little bit about how they can unlock your inner champion. For me, that was going in there, having my first lab test results and finding out I had severe vitamin deficiencies. They did let me know, hey, here's where you're at on your testosterone scale as well. I'm good to go there. They can find out all of that for you as well. It's Victory Men's Health, 4 great locations across the St. Louis area, and at victorymenshealth.com. That's victorymenshealth.com. Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, we'll be able to catch up with Jeremy Rutherford here in just a moment. He's coming to us live from Minnesota, where he's going to be taking in this Blues versus Wild game later on today. Alex, the Blues were not able to get their 3 straight victories, unfortunately, for the 7th time this year. They had a chance, and then they lost once again. But now you start again. You've got a road game in the division against the Minnesota Wild. This is a continuation, really, of a really important stretch for the Blues. Is there anything in particular that you're looking for tonight?
I'm looking for a stretch run. Tonight, specifically, no. I'm just expecting the same type of competitive hockey that we've seen from this team. Despite that loss the other night, it still feels like this team is staying in hockey games. But I don't think it has anything to do with one game. It has everything to do with probably the next 2 or 3 week stretch. I put this together yesterday. 15 games up until the 4 Nations break, BK. And for this team to realistically have a playoff shot, they got to go something like 10-2-3 in this next stretch. It seems impossible to do, but when you look at the opponents, the Calgarys, the Utahs, the Vancouvers, all of these teams are in your range of reachability in terms of Western Conference, and teams like Minnesota shouldn't scare you because they're also in the same kind of light that you are in terms of trying to push for a playoff spot.
You said Kaprizov is also hurt tonight.
Kaprizov's not playing. They don't have Jared Spurgeon. They do have a couple of other guys that are in and out of the lineup, but that really doesn't matter because Minnesota's still finding ways to win hockey games, and their stud of a goaltender, Gustafsson, is playing.
Strangely, they've been much better on the road than they have been at home this year. 15-3-3 on the road, which is just a ridiculous record. At home, 10-8-1. And with that as the backdrop to our conversation, we're going out to the Callier and Thompson hotline to be joined by our friend and the Blues insider for The Athletic. He's Jeremy Rutherford joining us on the show. JR, appreciate the time as always, man. Glad you're able to make it up there safely to Minnesota. Blues versus Wild later on this evening. What's the number one thing that you'll be monitoring heading into this game?
Well, I think heading into this game and heading into this next stretch is going to be something about consistency. That's what we need to see from the St. Louis Blues if they're going to be a playoff team. You know, when you play as well as they have in some of these games, but then you don't against the Buffaloes, against the Columbuses, just so many mistakes the other night that let that game get to where it got to. And so I revisited my bold predictions the other day at The Athletic, and in the preseason, I had said that I believe the Blues could make the playoffs. I had to re-answer that question mid-season after 41 games. And, guys, it was tough to put it into the article that I think they could still make the playoffs, but I did so for the reasons that you guys were kind of just addressing, that this team has been picking up some speed under Jim Montgomery. Things are improving 5-on-5. It is leading to more goal scoring, but the biggest thing is I don't trust so much the Blues, but I certainly don't trust some of those teams around them in the standings. And granted, they got some games in hand on the Blues, but every team in that little pocket of teams in the wild card chase, I think, have a lot of issues, maybe even more so than the Blues. But if the Blues are going to put themselves in that position, it's got to be a lot more consistent.
Jer, we've seen a lot of moves by Doug Armstrong going back to the offseason of the offer sheets all the way up to Cam Fowler's acquisition. What do you believe the level of importance the front office is putting on making the playoffs this season?
I think it's a huge importance. I think if you talk to anybody around the front office, near the front office, people who talk to the front office, it's all about making the playoffs. And certainly, they're going to stick to the retool plan. I don't think we're going to get to the trade deadline and you're going to see some significant player asset draft pick moved to bolster the team this year. You're not going to see a Theo Lindstein moved so they can go out and get a scoring forward to help them make the playoffs this year who might not be here in a couple of years. That's not going to happen. But I do think that Doug Armstrong is going to, as he always does, scour that market, the trade market, and see if there's a player that he can bring in. And it might not be the eye candy that everybody wants to bring in at that time of the trade deadline, but it's going to be somebody who can probably help this team and get them over any humps that they have at the trade deadline, get them into the playoffs. Major emphasis on that from this organization.
JR, in your piece of the bold predictions, you had one of those moves in there of trading for Michael Granlund. It's something that T-Bone and myself, we've both talked about here on the show as well, is potentially going out and acquiring, whether it's him or somebody like him that can be that number 2 center. That's not going to come at a cheap price, though. Getting guys that project as middle 6 centermen, it typically costs you a decent amount. Do you think that's something that Army will have interest in if this team is able to show over the next month or so that they have the potential to contend?
Well, and certainly nobody's going to go out and get a Michael Granlund jersey, right? Even if that trade is made.
Sure. T-Bone's getting a jersey.
It's not something that's going to excite people. And you're right. That could come at a cost that's higher than the Blues want to pay. But I think you have to get to that point, see who the teams that are interested in the Michael Granlund. And that's just a name. That's just a name I pulled because he fits what the Blues could use, a second-line center. If they don't bring up Dvorsky, maybe they bring him up, but I don't think they're going to put that kind of pressure on him trying to make the playoffs if that's the position that the team's in. So you can go out and find a Granlund-type guy, find out what the cost is, see what the bidding war is for a guy like that at the trade deadline, and maybe do give up a draft pick. And the Blues are a little lighter on those than they've been in past years just because they've moved so many. But San Jose is in a position where they're not going to make the playoffs. They're always looking for assets. And if they can part with him and the price isn't too high, he would be a guy I would just keep an eye on. I wouldn't say that that's something that would definitely pan out because you're right. The price could be too high.
I know that we're so early on this, JR. We've got another couple of months before we get to the trade deadline. But I'm going to ask the question. You mentioned you don't think they're going to give up their young assets at this year's deadline. One of the things that we talked about yesterday as a possibility, kind of throwing it out there to see kind of where this team is heading. They don't have a lot of draft capital. They don't want to give up those young prospects. Could you see somebody that is one of those young players like a Zach Bolduc maybe potentially being somebody that they would consider moving in a trade, or is that off limits as well?
No, I think that could be a possibility, and I'm not saying that they're going to trade Zach Bolduc, but I think there's probably a player who might garner some attention throughout the league, like a Bolduc who's got some games in the league now and has shown something. But, the Blues also might figure him to be part of their plans in the future. But I think they're going down the right path in terms of a player who has played some games, has some upside. Other teams around the league see it, and yet the Blues aren't giving up a Snuggerud, a Dvorsky, a Theo Lindstein, a Otto Stenberg, someone like that. So I think there might even be more interest among teams who are calling in that type of player if they're trying to make the playoffs or build for the next couple of years, a guy like Bolduc. So that's a name that I think would be in that category.
So, Jerry, you and I talked a little bit on Saturday's pregame show about the goaltending decisions moving forward. A tough game for Joel Hofer in the third period. Do you believe that we are going to see a lot of Jordan Binnington over these next 3 to 4 weeks?
Yeah, we'll see. They're on the ice now, and I'll find out, who the goaltender. I'm sure it's Bennington has come off that Hofer game the other night, tonight. And, I go by what Jim Montgomery has kind of said in the past and kind of hinted at. Sometimes you read between the lines. I think it'll be 2-1 Bennington, if not more, because he's been through this. Hofer's had a good season. Yes, he's had some hiccups, but overall it's been a good season for Joel Hofer. Up until the point where there's been people saying that maybe Hofer should play some more games than Bennington. But I just think with the experience and where this team's at and what they're trying to accomplish making the playoffs, that we'll see a lot more Jordan Bennington.
JR, last question that I've got for you on this one as well is, what do you think they need to do over the next 12 games or so? Like Alex has mentioned going, what was it, 10-2-3 is the kind of run that he thinks that they need to be on. How do you view this? What do they need to do to realistically view themselves as contenders going into that Four Nations face-off?
Well, I think that when you look at these last 16 games or so before that tournament, you're going to have a run of some sorts. Now, is it going to be, the 10-5-1, something along those lines? I think that would be pretty improbable based on what we've seen so far this season, going back to the inconsistency that I said. But at some point, either now or after the tournament, preferably before the tournament, there's going to have to be a 6-game winning streak. There just has to be. You can't hang 2 games above 500 and think you're going to make the playoffs. They're going to have to get, as Joey Vitale tells everybody, 10, 12, 13 games above 500 to be in that playoff race. So, I don't know that it's all going to come prior to the tournament, but you got to look at it this way. If they can't put together some sort of stretch like that, they don't deserve to be in the playoffs, which goes back to the consistency that I talked about. And you know what? These next 6 or 7 games, I looked at this a couple days ago, so I had to hopefully fact-check myself here. But there aren't many, other than Minnesota tonight, there aren't many playoff teams on their schedule these next 5, 6, 7 games. After that, it picks up pretty good in terms of playoff competition.
Yeah, it's six against Minnesota, Anaheim, Columbus, 2 versus Calgary, Utah. You got 2 versus Vegas, Dallas, Vancouver, and Colorado.
Yeah, so it really becomes quite something here after this next stretch of games. So you got this game against Minnesota. Like Alex said, they've got some guys that are out, Kaprizov, Spurgeon, but still winning games. And then after that, come home. And that's the other thing, guys. Got to win them home games. Like, they've got a below 500 record at home, and you've got a long stretch of games coming here. So if you can't take advantage of that, that's another reason you shouldn't be in the playoffs if you can't do that. Jeremy
Rutherford is the best in the business. He covers the Blues for The Athletic. You can read all of his great work over there, and you can hear him every Tuesday right here on BK and Ferrario. JR, appreciate the time as always, my friend. Enjoy yourself up there in Minnesota. We'll talk with you again soon.
Thanks, boys.
Absolutely. That's Jeremy Rutherford joining us as he does each and every Tuesday on BK and Ferrario. Appreciate him hopping on with us on the Callier and Thompson hotline.
So real quick, BK, because I've seen a lot of people on our Air Comfort Service text line that are like 10-2-3. Where's Alex getting this number from? So I just kind of went through this piece by piece, and I think the 2 regulation losses, in my opinion, are going to be Colorado and Florida. And then I look at overtime losses where you need to pick up a point. I look at that game against Edmonton. I look at one of those 2 games against the Utah Hockey Club and one of those 2 games against the Vegas Golden Knights. And other than that, yes, I understand Dallas is a really good team, but go look at what they've done against Dallas typically in the past. It's either winning straight up or winning in overtime. They're always 1-goal games. The Minnesota Wild, you've had their number with the exception of earlier this season, but still a 1-goal game. I don't think it's outlandish to look at this and say, like, yeah, I could see them put together a 6-game win streak, which is what JR just mentioned. That starts tonight against Minnesota. Maybe you fall in overtime against Vegas, and then you get the next one against Vegas, and you beat Dallas, and you beat Vancouver. It sounds crazy to say, but that's the type of crazy run this team has to go on. You have to have, at minimum, a 6-game win streak at some point in this next 15-game stretch if you want to be a playoff team.
Yeah, and the reason why on the timing it's so important is because you got to do this before you get to the deadline. Like, you got to prove to Doug Armstrong that you're a legit contender. Otherwise, why is he throwing out assets out there to continue to add to what could be a sinking ship? You've got to prove that, and you're running out of time. Like, coming out of that break, the Blues will have, 6 7 games before the deadline, and so you're not.
And a lot of them are
back.
back-to-back, tight schedule, and against very tough opponents.
Yeah, you need to do this prior to the Four Nations face-off, and then we'll see where they're at. You'll be able to reassess everything, and we'll see where they're going toward the deadline. All right, he's Alex. That's T-Bone. I'm BK. If you guys want to get involved in the show, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to do so. You can check us out, as always, as well at youtube.com/101ESPN STL. That is where the Graveyard Chat is available for you today. The Cat Dad Gamer is over there.
Cat
we
Dad.
got Mac. We got IROC, excuse me. We got all kinds of activity going on over in the Graveyard
Is
Chat.
bacon-wrapped wiener on there?
I haven't seen him today. Hasn't
Janet
made an
referenced-
appearance.
Janet referenced him earlier today on TMA.
Oh, really?
Got a good chuckle out of it.
Gator, no appearance
no
by
Gator
Gator
yet.
yeah, but Gator will probably be there eventually.
Gator doesn't like us very much early
Gator
on.
does like us, doesn't like you. Gator likes me and T-Bone.
Well, that negates the this us
All right.
conversation.
Well, I'm happy with that.
Sorry, Gator.
Splash
Dad
Dad
Deuce?
Juice does not like Deuce. Excuse me. I'm going to get this eventually.
It's
Does not like me.
understandable.
He does seem to like you, though.
It's understandable to get juice and deuce mixed up.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
All right, coming up next, NFL Quick Hitters here on 101 ESPN.
T-Bone here to tell you about Pick 6 from DraftKings as the NFL playoffs get underway this weekend. And as the official daily fantasy sports partner of the NFL, DraftKings does fantasy sports like no one else. Pick 6 is available in most states, including here in Missouri, and you can play for better payouts on Pick 6. It's super easy to get started. Select 2 or more players and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat. This weekend, I'm looking at Steelers-Ravens. I'm going to go less on Russell Wilson's passing yards and less on Pickens' 53.5 receiving yards. $10 can win me $30+ bucks, and DraftKings is making it even sweeter for first-timers. New Pick 6 customers play $5 and get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Win more cash on Pick 6. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app and use my promo code 101WXOS. That's promo code 101WXOS for new customers to play $5 and get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 18 plus. Agent eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Void where prohibited. One per new customer. Bonus awarded. Non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits expire in 30 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues back in action tonight as they visit the Minnesota Wild. And we'll bring in coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario. Then puck drop at 7 o'clock with the voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber. This Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. All right, so yesterday we got the news, Alex, that the Titans were going to be bringing back Callahan as their head coach. Today, we woke up to more news from the Tennessee Titans, who have this year's number 1 overall draft selection. They have fired their general manager. And apparently the general manager had been neutered in some of his abilities to, do his job anyways.
Good.
In the past year, they had apparently promoted his assistant to be the director of football operations. And so it was almost a situation where his assistant had been promoted over him. And now his old assistant is going to be running the search for the next general manager of the team. It feels as though nobody's totally certain what the structure is going to be here, because you've still got Callahan in place. Now you've got this director of football operations, which has been there previously under Ran Carthon, and now you're going to hire a new GM as well. This is what bad organizations do, man. Eventually, you just have to get to a spot where you fire everybody. And I'm not saying this is a good place to be, but you fire everybody and start anew. Or you have the general manager in place because you trust him, and he is the one that hires the head coach. But right now, they just have 3 different silos in place. Nobody seems to be on the same footing. I mean, they just allowed this GM, Ran Carthon, to fire Mike Vrabel via a power struggle a year ago. Vrabel, who is the hottest commodity on the coaching search this offseason, was there. And they said, no, please get out. We don't want you here anymore. We trust the GM, who has done everything wrong over his entire tenure with the Tennessee Titans. And now he's gone. Vrabel's gone. They've got a coach that nobody knows if he's any good in there. What a disaster.
Yeah.
A disastrous situation for the Titans.
Yeah, this is what an show looks like, and this is why they're going to be, this is why they didn't fire their head coach, because they realize that nobody's coming to this job right now. We got to figure out everything else before we worry about the head coach. This is a disaster, but it feels like everybody in Tennessee kind of understands it's a disaster. The moment Mike Vrabel was fired or stepped away, that's when I think everybody in Tennessee was like, oh yeah, this is going to be a really bad 5+ years. And this is why.
This is wild. I can't remember the last time I've seen something like this. And the fact of the matter that you allowed him to hire your head coach, and then the head coach sticks around after firing him, and now is he going to be involved in the GM search? Surely you're not giving that much to Callahan in year 2 on the job after he won just 3 games. It sounds like the guy
that's the director of the football operations is overseeing the entire search.
This is crazy.
This is not how you run a successful organization.
Not at all. Not at all. And the crazy thing is, it's a decent job. If you're a GM candidate, I've got the number 1 overall selection going into this offseason. The cap is not a great spot, but it's not as bad as it was over the last couple of seasons. They don't have a massive bloated salary on the books for their quarterback. They got a couple of guys that maybe want to get out of the contracts, but it's not these massive long-term, fully guaranteed deals like you would have in Cleveland, for example. And again, you do have the number 1 overall pick. You could get a Shedeur Sanders. You could go get Cam Ward if you want to this offseason. So it's not a terrible job. It's just a bad situation right now in Tennessee. As we continue with NFL quick hitters here at BK and Ferrario, the next piece of news that I wanted to get to is also related to a coaching search. The Chicago Bears, according to Adam Schefter, have sought permission to interview Cowboys head coach Mike McCarthy. They are currently awaiting a response from Dallas. If the Cowboys do not allow permission this week, the Bears could interview McCarthy after his negotiating window with Dallas expires on January 14th. So 1 week from today, they would be eligible to negotiate with McCarthy because McCarthy's contract is up. So Dallas has a week to negotiate with McCarthy to decide to bring him back, or they could just allow him to walk. Question for you. I know that McCarthy is a joke to a lot of people, understandably so. I don't think McCarthy's a great head coach. I think he is the 20th best head coach in the NFL right now. And if you're a legit contender, I don't think he's the guy that I would want running my operation. However, there is a floor that exists with Mike McCarthy. You know he is at least a professional. Like, he's going to walk into the job and things are going to be run a certain kind of way, and you reach like at least competence, a Bear level of competence. And for the Bears organization, that would be a massive upgrade from where they've been over the last, 20 years. Would this be a good hire for the Bears in your opinion? Like, if, let's say Ben Johnson tells them no, and Mike Vrabel tells them no, would you consider Mike McCarthy?
I wouldn't know, because I think the most important thing for the Chicago Bears right now is making sure you continue to develop Caleb Williams. And I don't know if Mike McCarthy's the best guy for that. I don't know if I have a name for you that would be the best guy for it.
That's the problem.
The first one that comes to mind, which he's old, and I don't know what he would want, but Pete Carroll would make some sense.
I think those are two guys that I would legitimately have interest in if I'm the Bears. I know it sounds insane, but
I would go Pete Carroll over Mike McCarthy.
I don't want to screw this up with Caleb Williams. And if I've got a guy in there that I know is at least decent, and I know that Pete Carroll and Mike McCarthy are decent, I would seriously consider this.
I mean, I know that Mike McCarthy's got his ish together, like you said, and when he steps in, you know what he's bringing, but like, it has kind of been a disaster with Dallas over these last couple of years in the sense of what the expectations were versus the team matching it.
But if I told you that over the next 5 years, the Bears become what the Cowboys have been, that's a success for the Bears. Like, Mike McCarthy, more often than not, wins you 8 games. And this year, because Dak Prescott got hurt, they fell short of that. If your goal is to win the Super Bowl, Mike McCarthy is not your guy. If your goal is to get to a baseline level of competence, Mike McCarthy might be exactly who you want as your head coach for the next few years. And yes, he is going to be hired to be fired, but man, 90% of these guys are hired to be fired within the next 3 to 5 years. At least with this, I'm not totally screwing up the next 5 years of Caleb Williams' development, and that is the number one goal for that organization right now, is to get this thing on the tracks. So, Mike McCarthy, I think Pete Carroll would be my pivot, personally. I like that answer from you, Alex. I really like him. But if you can't get him, I would go with the Mike McCarthy thing, and I'm like the last guy that likes to talk positive about Mike McCarthy.
Yeah. It feels weird to say, but he does kind of feel like the perfect transition coach, right? The guy that comes in is there for, like you said, 3 to 5 years, establishes a baseline, establishes just some level of consistency, and then you hope and go find that guy. I mean, I would still target Ben Johnson probably. Totally. Well, Vrabel and Johnson won. And then I agree, like, if those guys come off the board or they say, hey, we don't want that job, then I think it does make sense to pivot to Pete Carroll makes sense. McCarthy makes sense just because it establishes that kind of baseline. It's almost what the Blues wanted to do with Bannister. Granted, that only lasted 22 games. But, hey, in the NFL, that'd be like 2.5 seasons, so that'd work perfectly.
Yeah, I just think it's not as crazy as it sounds on the surface. I think there's a case to be made that McCarthy or Pete Carroll are actually pretty good hires for the Bears.
Does it make you think that he's their number one target since this has come out? Because nobody else
Ben Johnson is their number one target.
Okay, well, the reason I asked that is because nobody else has put in a request for a McCarthy interview, and it makes me think if you're going to do it, you don't just do it because, oh yeah, we want to just at least have a conversation. I think you do this because it's, hey, that guy we think is probably our number one target.
I think you do it because you want to get ahead of other teams that could potentially get in with an offer to McCarthy. I also think you potentially do it because Ben Johnson is probably not all that interested in your job. That could also be part of it. But you got to cover bases, man. Like, if you're in this spot, I want to talk to as many different people as I possibly can, if nothing else, to find out what they think of my organization. Like, hey, what do you like? What do you dislike? Where can we improve? Where are we a little short right now? I think these coaching searches, and especially general manager searches as well, are a really good opportunity for you to learn a little bit about where you're at as an organization.
I personally, too, think if I'm Chicago, and I understand trying to get ahead of this and get before another guy or another team jumps in and takes McCarthy, I think I would also wait and see what these playoff teams do if anybody fires their coach.
I don't think you can wait.
I know, but, man, if you make that decision and he's not right and Caleb Williams doesn't develop, now you've just screwed your organization up for at least 4 more years.
I will say, like, for all the crap that we give to McCarthy, he hasn't really screwed up quarterbacks. Aaron Rodgers turned out pretty good.
Well, it was hard to screw that one up.
At the time, it was a very much an unknown. Like, Aaron Rodgers was selected. He had a funky release, super elongated motion, and McCarthy did a really good job of coaching him up. They never had, like, the first-round weapons that you'd expect. That obviously became a huge story at the end with Rodgers. McCarthy did a really good job. Now, I think his offense leaves a lot to be desired now. It's like from 2007, and he hasn't really changed a lot of it. But it's fine. it works. He's hired pretty good people around him for the most part in his time in Dallas. I think it whiffed this year with the defense coordinator, but I thought Mike Zimmer was at least a good hire at the time. It just didn't work. I think he could be an okay hire. And Dak's done well under him. Like, he was second in the MVP voting 2 years ago. It's not that long, not that far removed that Dak was a great quarterback under him. So I think it would be a decent hire. I really do. I'm talking myself into it. Like, if Ben Johnson won't take it, Mike Vrabel won't take it.
Hopefully the Bears are not doing what you're doing.
Being fully exclusive here, I don't like Mike McCarthy, just like I don't like Sam Darnold. Other people see good things with him. Sure. I just don't trust it.
All right, last thing here as we go through some NFL quick hitters. There were a couple of odds makers that put out their odds yesterday of who's going to be the number one overall selection. Cam Ward, as of today, is the favorite to go number one overall. That would be with the Tennessee Titans. Shedeur Sanders is up there. Travis Hunter is also up there. But Cam Ward, the former Miami quarterback, is currently the favorite to go number one overall. What do you guys think about that? What does it say about next year's draft class that Cam Ward is the current favorite?
I mean, it says that it's not very good. And frankly, I think if I'm Tennessee, this is the worst year to get the first overall pick. If you're the Patriots, that's why you wanted it, because you knew you weren't taking a quarterback. And it's like, man, I could trade this and get bang for next season because this draft is such a disaster. But, I mean, I don't mind Cam Ward. I don't think he's a franchise-fixing quarterback, but I don't think Shedeur Sanders is that either.
Yeah, it is not an ideal quarterback class because I agree. I actually like Shedeur better than I do Cam Ward, but it's not by a lot. I think both those guys, the way you said it's perfect. I think you draft those guys, maybe end up with a franchise quarterback, but if you do, I don't know if you ever have a top 10 quarterback in the league, and I don't know if you can win a Super Bowl with that guy.
I don't say this as disrespect to the guy that I'm about to mention because he's been pretty good this year, but I think the ceiling for them is like what you saw this year with Bo Nix. I think Bo Nix is maxed out. This is the best version of him, and if you're a Broncos fan, you can decide if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But, I mean, they got them to the playoffs this year. Eventually, as a Broncos fan, I would guess you're probably going to be wanting more. But right now, man, this is great, given what the recent history has been for them. I think the same is probably true for the Titans. If you take Shedeur Sanders, I think the floor on him is pretty good. I think you will likely have like the 20th best quarterback in the league. Like, he could be what Bryce Young has been this year. And that's fine. But there's a cap on what the ceiling is for a quarterback like that, and I think they will eventually be wanting more. But that's where we're at. Like, I think the quarterbacks of this year's class would have gone like 17th overall last year in that class. It's not great.
Time to fix our franchise, boys.
It's not great. I would just take Travis Hunter. And see where you go from there.
I would be selecting him, and if I'm first overall, I would be trading that first overall pick to get like second or third and see if I could get a couple more picks and take Hunter.
The problem is like you look at like a next year's class, you're going, oh, what is? You're
It's
like
not a good
2 years away
situation
from
right now.
maybe there being somebody, and like even then,
And we know how this works. Quarterbacks can emerge. Like, Baker
Sure.
wasn't supposed to be the number one overall pick, and then he was. We've seen this before, but
sure,
it ain't looking great right now.
it's not like I don't know. Was it 2 years ago? Like this draft class that we just had, everybody was dreaming on Caleb Williams. Everybody, I mean, really the risers
may
in
have
that
been in the
year,
talk.
everybody the risers that year were Penix because of Washington, and then Bowden Nix kind of came out of nowhere. You thought he was a good
This guy that
quarterback.
had been around like a
but you didn't
third,
know-
second round pick, and then
didn't think
boom,
he'd be a guy,
exploded.
though. Didn't think he'd be the guy. But you had 2 or 3 guys that were up at the top of that draft. You're going, yeah, I can see that guy as an NFL caliber quarterback.
Yeah, Jaden Daniels, same thing.
Yeah, I'm looking 2 years down, 3 years out, and I'm going, I don't know. Like,
ain't
is the
great.
best quarterback 3 years from now in college like the Nebraska kid, Riola?
Maybe Arch Manning potentially up there, but we haven't seen him play. So it's just tough to say right now.
It'll be fine.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. In about 10 minutes or so, how would you grade the Blues as we have officially reached the mid-season point? We'll give you our answer on that. We'll hear from you as well. 314-399-9646. That is the Air Comfort Service text line, and use that as well for questions and answers, which is coming up next here on 101 ESPN. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and
Wait for
answers.
the queue over there.
Amateur hour.
I assumed we were on the air.
Our boss came
You
in.
get the finger.
I was going to let him talk to us for a second.
Smart.
If you guys have any questions,
Did
get
you
them
go
in
to
right
school for
now on the Air Comfort Service text line.
Oh, no, my contact just popped out.
All right, this one comes from the 980. Alex, over the last few seasons, I've watched every Blues team somehow be competitive against good teams, but they can't beat the bad teams. They're supposed to beat all of these teams, and it tells me that they're not getting up to play against them. What do you believe is the excuse or explanation for this?
Okay, so I'm going to totally get pushback from this, and here comes everybody's anger. Who are the bad teams that they lost to?
This year?
Yeah. Don't say Columbus, because Columbus had been the third best home team in the National Hockey League.
Alex.
Average. Dude, no, hear me out for a minute. Columbus has been playing well at home. They were averaging 4 goals per game on home ice. They've been bad on the road, but like when you take on a team that's very good in a specific area, you expect them to be a better performing team. Columbus was.
I think sometimes we make too much of the home road splits, but that's a conversation for a different day.
Am I
Fine,
supposed
but
to pretend like the Rockies have been good in recent years when they've had an above 500
hear me out for a
win
minute.
percentage at home?
This is where I'm going to get pissed off, apparently. They're average. I'm not, by the way, so don't freak out.
Gotcha.
They're averaging.
I liked the sit up from the chair move. That was a good one. You're like, hold on, wait.
They're averaging 4 goals per game on home ice. Columbus is. Their power play was at 31% on home ice. And by the way, their power play killed you. So did the offense.
No doubt.
Now, however you view Columbus, if you get beat by Columbus on Saturday at home, then we'll talk. Buffalo has been bad. Buffalo also won like 9 of their previous 12 games coming into that one against the Blues.
Who are the bad teams then? Can
are you telling me
direct
everybody's
to
good?
who they are?
San Jose,
We've lost to them once.
beat them twice.
Okay.
Chicago, beat the crap out of them. Nashville, beat the crap out of them. Now, I'll hear the argument. Like, Buffalo has been bad, but they were playing better hockey. You shouldn't have lost both of those games.
Buffalo has the worst points percentage in the Eastern Conference.
I get
so
it.
yes, they've legitimately been bad. I will hear no arguments.
But when you took
otherwise.
them on, they were performing better, which you should have been more prepared for. And that's one of those sleepers where you look at it and you're like, oh, this is a bad team. It'll be an easy game, and they make you pay for it. That's, to the texter's question, that's why you go into these thinking this is a bad team. This should be easy for us. And then they're playing better. You're not prepared for it.
So people are really going to hate my answer, maybe even more.
Oh, man.
I don't think the Blues are actually bad against these teams. I think you remember the games because they're bad teams. I think the Blues are pretty good against bad teams, honestly, generally speaking. But the games that they lose against those teams stand out even more. It's why the Cardinals, when they lose 2 out of 3 against Pittsburgh Pirates in previous seasons, you'd be like, oh, my God, well, that was terrible. Yeah, they lost 2 out of 3. Like, that happens. The Dodgers are going to lose 2 out of 3 against the Pirates at some point, or one of the teams that is similar to the Pirates. It's baseball. If you end up winning 66% of your games against the bad teams on your schedule, you did pretty damn good. That's what you need to do against those teams, and then go roughly 500 against the good ones. The problem at times for the Blues, man, they don't win 500. They don't go 500 against those good teams on their schedule. They end up being squished into the middle. They're slightly better than the teams that are at the bottom of the barrel, and they're significantly worse than the teams at the top. So that's what they need to do. They've got to start winning these games against the good teams. Yeah. Like that. That's really what they need.
And that's what the rest of the season looks like. Like, you can believe it however you want, if they were bad teams, if they were better teams, whatever. You got to beat teams that are above you or in the same position as you in the Western Conference for the rest of this season, and that's what's going to make or break the playoffs.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. A couple more questions here. From Marcus on the text line. Would you trade Donovan to the Seattle Mariners if they were willing to trade you Bryce Miller in return? I would not. Bryce Miller's a really good pitcher, and I like him a lot. I think Brendan Donovan's one of those guys that, like, unless you're getting something I just can't turn down, I'm not trading Brendan Donovan. I think he's too important to what you are.
Brendan Donovan, to me, is kind of like what Jake Neighbors is to the Blues. Plays a certain role that's going to be hard to replace, and I can't trade that unless I'm getting a significant upgrade. And I don't think this team is worth trading for a number 2 ceiling starting pitcher when you get rid of a player that should be a catalyst for your offense.
Yeah. If I'm trading Donovan, it's probably in a package for a stud. That's kind of how I view it.
This guy was pretty good.
Bryce Miller's a really good pitcher.
2.84 ERA, 180 innings.
Yeah, Bryce
8.5
Miller's really good.
What do you always say, T-Bone?
Do
Pitchers
it.
break.
That's part of it for me. I think
Pitchers
Donovan has a
break.
skill set that is very consistent, and I have no idea what Bryce Miller is going to be next year, much less 2 years from now.
I think it comes down to what do you believe? How much do you believe in Thomas Ajacey? because he would be the guy that would take over the kind of Swiss Army knife role.
And
if you traded
to a
Donovan,
different degree because of the left-handed presence at the top of your
on
order.
base. Yeah, I think it comes down to those two answers. To me, more so on like how much do you believe in Sajaci. I'm a lower on Sajaci. It's why I probably don't do the deal, but I'm open-minded to it. Like if you said, okay, maybe not Donovan, replace his name and put like Newbar in that conversation. Oh man, I think Bryce Miller's a stud. Maybe not number one.
Is it strange
but a really
that
good
I'd be
number
more
two.
likely to do that with Newt than I would
do
with
Newt in a
Donovan?
heartbeat.
And I understand that Newbar has a higher ceiling than Donovan.
I would do Newt in a heartbeat.
I don't question it at all because I think when I look at Newt, it's, I agree, probably a higher ceiling because I think he's got, actually, I don't know. I do wonder if Donovan's got more pop than Newt, but I just don't know because I haven't seen Newbar, and that's why I'm okay to do it, right? It's about selling high rather than doing the classic Cardinals move and holding on to the prospect until there's no value.
Drinkwitz has a new thing that he's going with called, he says it's about production over projection, production over potential. I'm going to side with the production. And Donovan's just had more production at the major league level so far than Lars Nootbaar. He's Alex. That's T-Bone on BK. Coming up in 15 minutes, we'll play a game of Bet It or Forget It. You guys give us a scenario. We will tell you if we are betting it or forgetting it here on 101 ESPN. But next, what grade would you give the Blues as we have now arrived officially at the midpoint of the season? We'll give you our answers, hear from some of you next here on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends out at Classic Air Care who are taking care of your HVAC system. Whether it's this frigid cold air that's out there, you got an older unit, you need a company that you can trust. And I have been trusting Classic Air Care since 2016. For our older units that we have had, we now have upgraded to a brand new one, but we called out Classic Air Care to walk us through that entire process. They've got financing options available for you when you purchase a new HVAC system. All of it is there for you over at Classic Air Care. But when I talk about their customer service, you've got a 4.8 rating and over 2,500 Google reviews. Speaking of their incredible customer service and their knowledgeable technicians, like this one from Scott. Happy customer of Classic Air Care and will continue using them for all of my HVAC needs. They always show up when promised, and they're text friendly, especially Brandon, who helped us out with a major jam before we were leaving for vacation. So use the company that's taking care of you, and that is Classic Air Care. Call them today or schedule online. Just do me a favor and tell them Alex Ferrario sent you. Classic Air Care and ClassicAirCare.com.
With Alex and T-Bone on BK, so the Blues are officially at the halfway point of the NHL season, which means it's grade season, Alex.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Over at The Athletic, they put together their grades for every team at the midpoint of the NHL season, and here is what Jeremy Rutherford had to say about the Blues. He gave them a B- for their first half. Said this is where most of us expected the Blues to be near halfway of the mid-season, hovering around 500, but within reach of the wildcard spot. That probably means that they could be deserving of an average C grade, but I'm giving them a slight bump because of their .618 win percentage since Jim Montgomery took over on November 24th. That's tied for 10th in the NHL in that span, and also because of the jolt that Cam Fowler has given them on the blue line since being traded from Anaheim. So he's going with the B-, a little bit of a bump from what would otherwise be a relatively average season. Alex, what grade would you give the Blues as we have now reached the midway point?
I would give them a B. And right around the line of what JR's thinking. Like, if they wouldn't have made the move for Jim Montgomery, I think we would be talking probably about like a C-, D+. Because the expectations were playoffs and you weren't performing. But I think since Jim Montgomery took over, you've seen a change for the Blues. The offense has picked up defensively. We talked yesterday about how you've been the stingiest team in the National Hockey League. Your special teams are still struggling. I think that's personnel related. And your goaltending's had their ups and downs. But I just think that's one of those seasons. It's hard not to give them a B, with the exception of you look at where they're at in the standings, and it's concerning. But you're still in the mix of things, so I look at this and say this is a B, because to me, a little bit above average of what I expected this season for St. Louis.
T-Bone, what would you give them?
I would give them a C. I think because they have playoff expectations, then I have to curve my grade towards viewing them as a playoff team. And they're not a playoff team. I mean, they're 3 points back. Vancouver's got 2 games in hand on the St. Louis Blues. And I look at this roster and I go, this isn't a playoff roster. You know, they're missing another goal scorer on the wing. They don't have whether you want to call it a second or third line center, one or the other. You know, I think Schen's been fine since he moved to that second line spot. But they just don't have enough guys. Offensively, they're not, though it's been better under Montgomery. And I'm now more in favor of the Montgomery hiring, even though I had some questions when they made it. Offensively, they're still lackluster. Their special teams is a killer right now. They're not good on the power play. PK's not very good. Defensively, they've been sound, but I think at times under Bannister, you saw spurts of them being a good defensive hockey team. So I would give them a C. For them having expectations of being a playoff team, I think they deserve an average grade because they are an average team right now.
I would give them a B as well, Alex, and it's because of all the things that you said. I'm grading them almost exclusively on what they've done since Jim Montgomery took over.
Yeah.
I just think it's unfair. I think they've been two different teams. If you look at the team that they were prior to Jim Montgomery, I think they were a poorly coached team. Just flat out. Mm-hmm. And you look at the team that they've been since Jim Montgomery took over, it's a different roster. It's a different group. They've been playing much better. You look at some of their numbers. 5th in the Western Conference in points percentage since Monty took over. 4th in the Western Conference in goals per game since Monty took over. 4th in the Western Conference as well in goals allowed per game since Monty took over. Now, they still have issues. You look at what they're doing on special teams, specifically on the power play, but you could also look at their penalty kill. Actually, penalty kill is even lower. Mm-hmm. Penalty kill is 27th under Jim Montgomery. Power play is 21st under Jim Montgomery. Those have to be improved.
25th under Drew Bannister on the power play, and penalty kill was 24th under Drew Bannister.
So you're a bottom 10 team on both special teams units all season long, and that has remained the case under Monty. That speaks to a personnel issue more than a coaching issue. Mm-hmm. But the rest of it, like what they're doing at 5-on-5, I said this a lot when they had Drew Bannister at the helm. You can't win when you're lacking in the special teams area and you're just playing for a tie at 5-on-5. Well, they've stopped doing that. Now they are starting to win the 5-on-5 numbers, and that is far more sustainable than anything that will take place on a power play or a penalty kill. Mm-hmm. Those numbers, dude, can be skewed with one big game on either side of things. Like you go 5 for 5 on the PK tonight, suddenly the numbers look a lot better. Yep. You go 4 for 5 on a power play in one game, suddenly, boom, you go from 21st to like 14th.
Yeah.
It can happen really quickly because it's such a small sample. At 5-on-5, though, those numbers hold up over time a lot better, and they've just been a better team in that regard.
Here's the other reason why I give them a B. And again, I'm kind of doing this where I'm gapping it with Jim Montgomery. Who's the player that's underperforming under Jim Montgomery?
You could have said Saad up until the other night.
But, okay, now let me add the caveat to it, because I was expecting you to say Saad. Who's the guy that's a part of their core of the future that's underperforming on this team?
That's an interesting question.
Because to me, Thomas and Kyrou performing like I expected them. Honestly, Kairu's better than what I expected.
Yeah.
Pavel Buchnevich is probably a little less, but since Jim Montgomery, you can argue it, but I mean, he's still almost been like a point per game player since Jim Montgomery has taken over, but you need more goals from him. Dylan Holloway has been way above expected. Jake Neighbors is probably around average.
Booch would probably, if you're asking me about the core players, Booch would probably be the only one, and it's not like a bat. He's been a +9.
You're just wanting more goals from him, and I think some of that's just the carryover from being a center for the first month and a half of the season. Defensively, Broberg's improved. Now you've got Fowler in here. Colton Parayko's the same guy. That's the other reason. Like, Jim Montgomery was brought in to solidify the actual core of players. Now go to Drew Bannister. Kairu was playing well, but Buchnevich was not good. Dylan Holloway was non-existent. Jake Neighbors was fine. Defensively, Broberg was really good, but the other areas weren't very good. So, like, I also give it a little bit of a bump because Jim Montgomery has solved the question of do they have the right core pieces moving forward.
So we said all year, this team's going to be determined by what their best players do, right? We said that coming into the season. Like, you got to get Thomas, Booch, Parayko, Neighbors, Holloway, Kairu, Broberg. Those guys specifically have to be your best dudes on the ice. You know who leads the team in plus-minus since Jim Montgomery has taken over?
Probably Pavel Buchnevich because he's a +9.
Thomas, Booch, Parayko, Neighbors, Holloway, Kairu, Broberg.
Yeah.
Those are your top 7 players in plus-minus since Jim Montgomery has taken over. It's no coincidence, man. They said when he was hired, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, Doug Armstrong said this. He has a history of making the best players on your team play like the best players on your team.
I mean, when you're walking up to Kairu and saying, like, hey, we need you to do this, David Pasternak used to do this. You think they're going to listen to that? Yeah, I could be like Pasta. And that's what Jim Montgomery offers to this team. So, if anything, it gives you a lot of optimism. I know it sucks right now because you're kind of in the thick of things. I don't know if in the thick of things is because of Jim Montgomery. It's because of what took place in the first month and a half of the season of what put you in this position.
All right, let's go to a couple of these from the text line. 314 said, guys, it's a C grade for me. The team is as average as you can get. Somebody else said they're a 500 team. How could anybody give them more than a C at this point? Somebody else from the 573 said the Blues are currently the hot girl in high school with the tattoos and daddy issues. You know it's going to be a lot of fun, but sooner or later you're going to be crying in your truck drinking yourself to sleep.
Real quick, though, but they're not.
That kind of hit home.
God, that did hit home. Man, I actually feel exposed on that.
You guys had a hot girl with tattoos that you
not
dated
a tattoos,
okay.
Piercings.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I wasn't drinking myself
That
in
was
the car.
my middle school experience more than my high school
Tattoos or
experience.
piercings?
The piercings, yep.
You saw a piercing, you're like, oh my God.
I guess it did it for me.
BK saw that mid-drift shirt, he saw a belly button piercing, is like, what is happening to me right now?
As an 8th grader, a lot of weird things were going on.
Puberty hit me real quick. I wasn't drinking in the car, though, sad. I was eating Jack in the Box tacos,
From
sad.
the 636, guys, I'd give them a B. They're an average team that's somewhat entertaining most nights, and that's good enough for me.
But by the way, though, they're not a 500 team. Like, if you're looking at them overall, but Montgomery, they're a 600 points percentage team.
I guess it just depends on how you're grading it, right?
Sure.
I can't grade it with Bannister,
well, see,
though.
I get what you guys are saying. I also know that that's in the range of outcomes for this team, right?
I'm not sure it is with a good coach.
Not with a good coach.
I think it is. And this is where we differ, right? This is part of my whole argument against I don't even know if it was really against Monty. It was more the NHL, right? Where how much does the coach really matter in the NHL? And I know you're pointing at your computer right now. For all I know is you're referencing the text line.
No,
but
600 points percentage versus like a 475.
It's 20 games right now.
It's a small sample size, but we can also watch the games and see that they legitimately look different in every underlying. It's not just the points percentage, all of the underlying stuff. It's like if you did a drive today, you drove to Chicago, right? But your check engine light was on the entire way and you've got low tire pressure and you know, like, at any point this thing could go sideways, but you make it. You succeeded on your trip. Are you getting back home? If you do it the exact same way, we're not entirely sure. If you just got an oil change and everything's good to go, you got no check engine, like everything's good, you have all of your maintenance done the way that it's supposed to, and you go up to Chicago and you get there, I feel a lot better about making it home on that second trip than I did on the first trip. The check engine light was on when they had Drew Bannister here, and they were still an average hockey club, but it looked like this could get worse quickly. Under Jim Montgomery, it's the second trip. They're about an average to above average team right now. But there's no like blinking lights indicating this thing is about to go sideways other than our own fear of what the team has been in the past.
Well, and it was a little Tony by me, BK, or T-Bone, that I just pointed to the stats, so I apologize to you. I'll accept
but
that.
fair, so I'll accept it.
Okay, good. So all of us are accepting it. But here's the other thing, what I would reference. Like, we've seen this with Jim Montgomery in the past. 567 points percentage and 597 point percentage in Dallas, albeit that one was a 31 game sample size before he was fired. 823 and 665, and then Boston let him go when he was he was around 500. So, like, I mean, I've seen the reference to this guy having success at like a 500-plus point percentage clip throughout his entire career, and now you're putting him in a situation where it's not win a Stanley Cup now like it was in Dallas and like it was in Boston.
I also think there's some truth to this. This text comes from the 314. Guys, the Blues are an entertaining watch again. They put out the effort, and they're in the majority of their games with Monty. I would give them a B with Monty, a D with Bannister. I think that is part of the conversation here. I enjoy watching the Blues.
Yeah.
Under Jim Montgomery. Like, they're just a more entertaining product to watch. I feel like the effort has been there basically every night. It's not every single night, and you're not going to get that from any team. Like, even Toronto right now, they're a really good hockey club, but there's nights where they don't look right. So I enjoy watching them with Montgomery, and I couldn't say the same thing most of the time under Drew Bannister. Mm-hmm. Now, last year,
he did say it.
Under Bannister, I did enjoy watching them more than I had previously under Berube, where they just looked like they had given up on the season. So T-Bone might be right. There may come a point in time, a month from now, 2 months from now, where I'm like, whoa, what happened? Like, where did that energy go that they had early on under Monty? But I can't grade them on that. I can't get pre-mad at them. I've enjoyed watching them under Jim Montgomery. And so I would give them B for what they've done under him. I feel like that's the only fair way to go about doing this. But that's for me. I can't speak for anybody else, you know. Yep. All right, he's Alex. That's T-Bone. I'm BK. In 15 minutes or so, the Cardinals pitching projects pretty damn well for 2025. Now, that will change if they have to trade Eric Fetty or Ryan Helsley or others because of the cap crunch that they appear to be in, according to their own internal mandates on where they have to be for their payroll. But as of today, it projects pretty well. Is that something you would agree with? Do you see how this Cardinals pitching staff actually ends up being better than expected? We'll get into that in 15 minutes. Bet It or Forget It is next here on 101 ESPN. We were talking off air about that FS1 lawsuit.
Oh, man, don't do that. We're not getting political.
I don't think it's a political conversation.
Better to forget it.
Better to forget it. Joy Taylor will continue hosting Speak.
How about that one?
I've got a lot of thoughts on it. Not sure this is the place to share them.
We'll do it on the podcast afterwards. The Cardinals one or the political one?
I will just say
the
that,
theology one.
Based on what we know from the lawsuit, I think people are. I think people are doing Joy Taylor a little wrong here.
Okay.
I do. I don't think legally, based on what we know from what has been put out there in the lawsuit,
T-Bone, let's step out.
She did anything wrong. Now, morally, I understand some objections to what she did. But I find it kind of odd that she was named in this lawsuit when legally she's not at fault for anything.
Better to forget it. BK will be here tomorrow.
Yeah, probably not.
Hopefully forget. I'm tired of me putting in these awkward spots.
You just try and make a joke out of something else to get BK away from the topic.
What happens off air doesn't come on air.
BK, your nose is looking good this year.
You guys know me better than that. If you bring something off air.
Next time we need to have a conversation, Brandon, please go on the
what kind of friend are you?
Let me know if this is something that cannot come on air. Otherwise, it's all in play.
Here's how that works. When the microphone's not blue, that means you cannot bring it on air. But when it's blue, it goes on air.
Okay, well, mine's green. So
yours is green?
Oh, I'm looking at the cameras.
Oh, I'm looking at the mic button over by T-Bone.
All right, better to forget it. Nolan Arenado is on the Cardinals on opening day.
Bet it. I think this Red Sox thing is a big smokescreen, and I think it's not going to happen. And then the Cardinals will be like, well, we don't know what to do. And then he will be here on opening day. He'll take that first trot out to the field in Jupiter, and everyone will be like, oh, he shouldn't be here.
Be kind of awkward. I'll bet it. I think he'll be a Cardinal. I'm not buying what the Red Sox are selling. So I think it's just them. I don't think he's going to be an Angel, whether he wants to or not. I don't think the Angels have much interest either. I think he's going to be a St. Louis Cardinal come 2025.
I'm going to forget it just because I'm holding out hope. And I think the Cardinals monetarily, whether we believe it or not, like they seem to believe they need to get this money off of the books. So I think there will potentially come a point in time where they say, if we got to attach an asset to this, we got to attach an asset to this, and it is what it is. So I'm going to forget it. I think he will be somewhere else.
Good for you being optimistic about the Cardinals in 2025, man. We're only a week in, and you were starting the year off right.
That's what I'm doing.
Appreciate that about you guys. Better to forget it. Next season, not next season. In Jim Montgomery's contract with the Blues, he wins a Coach of the Year award. So 5-year deal. In that 5 years, he wins a Coach of the Year award with the Blues.
I'll say bet it. Why not? Especially because he'll be here when the expectations have been low. Mm-hmm. And as he continues to win, they will probably do so when the expectations are not extraordinarily high. So, yeah, that's typically how you win the Coach of the Year. I can see it.
I'll bet it because when you're in a retool, every year, I feel like every year you're slowly going to see those expectations move forward, and at some point the team will take that leap that we're not expecting, right? Like we may go into a year and say, maybe they get that wild card, and then boom, they're top 3 in the division, and they surprise us with that leap. So yeah, I'll bet it. Why not? I could see where they at one point take that leap, and then he gets credit for it and wins Coach of the Year.
I'm not saying it would be the same because we don't know what the first part of the season would look like if Montgomery was there. But just going off of a 600-point percentage with Jim Montgomery, you'd be in that final wild card spot, couple of points ahead of the Vancouver Canucks.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. T-Bone, what do you got for us today?
Guys, bet it or forget it. The St. Louis Blues will finish with more points this season than they did last year when they finished with 92.
Bet it. I think they get to 94, 95, and I think that's going to be enough to get to the playoffs because I think Vancouver is going to fall flat on their face. Calgary is going to hit honestly, they're in one right now, and I don't think Utah's. By the way, can we just sidetrack and be like, remember when everyone was all hot and heavy on the Utah Hockey Club? Like, oh, they're going to be great, man. Wasn't there someone around here that was like,
thanks, man.
I think they're going to be pretty bad.
I mean, to be fair, they're like the same points percentage as you.
Yeah.
Oh, here, Alex. Yeah, look at it.
Yeah, but
they have 41 points in 2 fewer games.
Mind you,
if you think they've been bad, you think the Blues have also been bad.
I think they're bad in terms of the expectations that were placed on them because everyone was like, that's at least the number 1 wild card spot, if not competing for a top 3 spot in the Central.
That's what the Blues believed.
No, they did not.
I didn't believe that about them. I thought they would be kind of in this range. I thought it would be like Utah.
even Greg Wyshynski. No, I'm not saying you. I'm saying when we had Greg Wyshynski on, he was like, oh, yeah. Nashville was supposed to be that too. And look at Nashville.
I feel like Winnipeg's the biggest surprise.
I'd agree with that.
LA's a little bit of a surprise for what they've been.
I think Minnesota's a little bit of a surprise. I didn't expect them to be this good. I thought they'd be probably around
one of the top 3 in the division, though.
Yeah, I just thought they'd kind of be where they were last year in terms of a wild card.
Projections were what? Minnesota or Colorado, Dallas, and Minnesota as the top 3, right?
Yeah.
And then Winnipeg was kind of considered to be in that next range.
Wild card. Nashville.
And I thought Nashville, for some people, we did not agree with this, but Nashville was in that conversation. And then I put Utah in that conversation.
Vancouver's been the biggest disappointment. And that's why I think this team will get in and have more points than where they were last year, because the only team that I think you're really competing with for that bottom wildcard spot is going to be Vancouver at the end of the season. And with all of this drama going on with Pettersson and Miller, I think the Blues are going to surpass them for that final wildcard spot.
I'll be interested to see. I'm going to bet this, by the way, for your question of 94 points. 94 I'll bet it, but I think it's going to be really close. Like that feels like if I had to put a number on where I think they'll be, it's probably right around there. So it's a good number.
I don't think they'll be less than that.
Yeah, see, I would forget it. I think they're still going to end up being less than that. I don't think by a lot. Like, I don't think they're going to be an 82-point team. I think they're going to fall like 90, 91 is where they'll end up.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. The YouTube chat, the graveyard, is over at youtube.com/101 ESPN STL. If you have something for Bet It or Forget It, we'll get to it here momentarily. From the 314, Alex, Bet It or Forget It. The Blues' biggest games of the year are the home and away games against Calgary next week. That's a really interesting
They're home and home.
Home and home.
They're both here against Calgary, which is the weirdest thing with that schedule. I would bet that one.
It's a huge swing, potentially.
Yeah. I mean, that's
an 8-point swing.
Yeah, that's 8 points. That kicks Calgary out of the conversation, and it pushes you back into the wild card spot. I would say in terms of importance, it's those 2 against Calgary, and then it's the home and away against Utah before the Four Nations tournament. Those 4 games are 8 points in terms of pushing 2 teams out of it, and then it comes down to you in Vancouver.
The other thing with the games against Calgary, if you win those 2, you will have swept the series.
Yeah, because you beat them earlier.
Season. So you'll have the head-to-head tiebreaker against them as well, which could loom important.
Yeah, I would bet it because you've got the 8-point swing, so you can potentially bury the Flames. Now, also vice versa, right? The Flames can potentially kind of, quote-unquote, bury you with that 8-point swing. Not best case. At minimum, it has to become a neutral series, right? Where you both split. There is no swing then in that scenario. You both walk out of it with 2 points. That's the minimum that has to happen.
See, I think the minimum that has to happen is 3 points. I think you have to win both games or at least lose one in overtime. You have to have some type of advantage over them, because if you just do a clean wash in that, well, then you're right back where you're at. And at some point, you have to start leapfrogging teams. That's why the Utah one's so important, because if you lose both of those, or if you only get 2 out of those 4 points, well, now Utah has leapfrogged you, and they've got 2 games in hand on you. Like, you've got to take, at minimum, 3 points in both of those games.
All right, next one here. This will be the last one for Bet It or Forget It. Guys, bet it or forget it. We will see an all Big Ten college football playoff with Penn State playing against Ohio State in the championship.
I'll bet it.
You got Penn State against Notre Dame?
Isn't that what the game is?
When I'm confused.
You said you've got Penn State versus Notre Dame. Isn't that what?
Sorry, you've got Penn State beating Notre Dame.
Yes.
Fair question.
Sorry, I was like, wait. Yeah. Penn State beating Notre Dame, Ohio State beating Texas.
Yep.
Yeah. And I got Penn State versus Ohio State. And as much as I want to believe it's going to be Ryan Day, I think Penn State wins that game.
I am going to forget it. I've got Notre Dame versus Ohio State as well.
Wow, you think Ohio State? Or you think Penn State loses?
Yep. That's the one game that we're on different sides of. I feel like everybody's got Ohio State against Texas, which makes me feel like I should be betting Texas plus 5.5.
Probably.
But I don't think I've heard anybody say that they think Texas will beat Ohio State.
Yeah, I would bet this. Watching Notre Dame against Georgia, I like Notre Dame's defense. I don't know if their offense will be able to get the job done against Penn State. So I've got a Big Ten final.
Interesting. All right, there we go. That is what we've got for you with Bet It or Forget It. In 15 minutes, we'll get into the junk drawer. But coming up next, do the Cardinals have better pitching than we're currently projecting? At least some of the analytics seem to think so. We'll tell you about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues back in action tonight as they visit the Minnesota Wild. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. And then Joey joint Chris cover for puck drop at 7. This Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. CNLondoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
So I think most people view the Cardinals' current pitching situation as being average. Is that a fair way to assess it?
Yeah. I'd even use the old Brett Underwood cut. Yeah.
Really? You think it's bad? They're pitching?
No, we just don't like average, BK. I know you like average. We don't like average.
You were bragging about the Blues being 500 earlier.
600.
So I would view them as being pretty average. I guess I'm alone in that regard. Other people say, I don't
likes
view it
average.
that way.
Way to go, man.
So there was a projection that was put out the other day on teams' ERA plus, which is like OPS plus, same thing, but ERA plus. It's just for ballpark, stuff like that. When I looked at this, I was like, that'd probably be around like 20. 20th in the league.
That's not average, BK.
Yeah, 15 to 20, somewhere in that range. That's kind of what I'm talking.
Rounding up.
Don't mention it.
What kind of rounding system do you
Where would
use?
you guys guess that they rank?
Well, because this is a BK game, I'm going to say top 10.
I'll give you the top 5. Seattle, Atlanta, Detroit, New York, Philly. Those are the top 5 teams when it comes to ERA plus projections for the
Mets or Phillies? Our Mets are Yankees.
Sorry, Mets. The New York Mets are 4th.
Couldn't say Yankees for some reason.
Just to give you context on kind of like who the teams are.
Again, this is a BK
really
game,
good.
so I'm going to say they're 8th or 9th.
Yeah, I'm still going to hold out that they're not top 10. I'll go there like 11 or 12th.
11th. They are at a 104, so 4% above league average. For context, Atlanta, who was second, tied with the Tigers and the Mets, are at 107. So the Cardinals are pretty high up here when it comes to what people are projecting for their pitching for the upcoming season. The reason why I wanted to bring this up, Alex, is because if the Cardinals are going to be better than expected next year, I don't know if that's likely or not. I think it's possible. I think people are underselling how likely it is, but whatever. Even if you totally disagree with me and think I'm a fool, it's fine. This would seem to indicate, man, their pitching is actually not that bad. And you look at who they have, like Sonny Gray is a really good starter. Whether you want to debate whether he's a number 1 or not, whatever. He's a really good starting pitcher. He's a guy that you could go into a playoff series, put him up against number 1s from other teams, and you feel decent about your chances. Eric Fetty, a good pitcher. Not in the same category as a Sonny Gray, should not be a number 2 starter on a playoff team, but a good starting pitcher that contenders would like to have on the contracts that he's currently earning. I think Palante's pretty solid. Back-end rotation starter, decent. Same thing for Michael McGreevy. I think he could be in that conversation next year. You don't love having Michaelis at his current projected salary, but he's fine as a number 5 starter at least. And then you've got guys that could end up being a part of your rotation with like Tinkens and Steven Matz. We'll see what happens with him. Liberator, we'll see where he ends up being. At some point, Quinn Matthews could potentially be a part of this thing. Are we underselling the possibility that the Cardinals could actually have decent pitching going into 2025?
Probably, depending on what this pitching is going to look like, because, I mean, it could drastically be different than what the expectations are if you can't move Arenado and Eric Fetty's gone. But like, if you're telling me my 1 through 3, based off of what we saw last year, is Sonny Gray, Eric Fetty, and Andre Palante, I don't think that's going to win you an NL Central title. But what I do think is it's going to be much more competitive than what last year's 1 through 3 was, to where you were relying on Miles Michaelis as your number 2 and Kyle Gibson or Lance Lynn as your number 3. And Gibson was good in the first half of the season, but you knew it was going to fall on its face at some point. So, I'm not going to sit here and start celebrating what the Cardinals will have to go for a rotation, but you've accomplished the goal that I wanted you to accomplish. You've pushed Miles Michaelis to a 4 or a 5 in your rotation, which is where it should be. And there's some exciting players that you're going to get to see next year. McGreevy, Graceffo, Quinn Matthews, Tink Hens. You got your 1 through 3, as long as Andre Palante carries over what he did last year. Your 4-5, who cares? They're making starts for you. And then your young players. So, yeah, I could see them being 10th or 11th best pitching staff in Major League Baseball.
If we're saying underselling it, I don't know if we are, because I think they're like a mid, like 15 to 20th best rotation. Because I just don't see, once you get to Sonny Gray, to me, there's a significant drop-off. Like, when I look at Eric Fetty, if I said that Eric Fetty had a 4.24 ERA, covered like 170 innings next year, and 8 strikeouts per 9, would you see that in the range of outcomes?
That's possible, yeah.
Yeah, that was Kyle Gibson last year. Like, I think you might have Gibson and Eric Fetty, and he's making less at $7.5 million. And we just agree, and I agree with what you said, right? Like, Gibson last year was your 3, maybe, with Lance Lynn. Okay, well,
Gibson
then I've got that.
2.
I think Palante's going to regress. Yeah, by the end of the year. Yeah.
I would say by week 3.
Oh, wow.
Giving up on Michaelis that quickly? He was not a good pitcher last year.
I mean, I gave up on Michaelis the first start.
After his comments of checkbook baseball.
Yeah, it's like, way to go, man. Can't back it up.
I just look at that and I go, okay, so Fetty's, I think, could regress to being Gibson.
But, so I said it's in the range of outcomes. I don't think it's the likeliest outcome. Like, I think Eric Fetty is probably a little better than that. So I would say that's where we kind of go on diverging paths. Is I think you could get a better version of that. Like, I think Andre Palante might be better than what you just described as well. So it's possible you have 2 guys next year that are better than what Kyle Gibson was a year ago, and Kyle Gibson last year was your number 2 starter. So that's how you end up improving. And maybe more importantly, I just think the back of the rotation could be more stable as well. I think Michael McGreevy adds potentially, it's all potential here, but a little bit more stability there. And when they get Miles Michaelis out of the rotation, if they get Miles Michaelis out of the rotation with a Quinn Matthews, I think that could be a significant upgrade as well. It's like, I think you start out better than you started out last year. And then I think there's potential for it to upgrade from there. So that's how I'm viewing it, but that's upside versus T-Bone, your floor conversation.
It's weird how I'm not where T-Bone's
I look at the rotation, and I don't see a ton of upside in the rotation.
Sonny.
Oh, I see Palante as an upside.
See, I think Palante, like, his upside to me is like maxes out at like a number 3.
That's fine,
and
but
like,
I relied on Lynn, Michaelis, and Gibson to be awesome for me all of last year.
But I also have to like look at that and go, okay, well, that might even be like year 2 then, right? Like, I see this rotation kind of how I've looked at. It's different sport. Where the Blues were there for a while, it was, okay, well, you've got guys that are playing one line too far up in the lineup, right? Like, this guy should be a 3rd-line winger, but he's got to be on the 2nd line because you don't have that 2nd-line winger. That's how I feel about the Cardinals rotation, right? If I'm having to squint and say Fetty or Palante is my number 2 going into opening day, well, then I don't have a good rotation, right? Because I'm looking at guys that are playing trying to be put into a role that they shouldn't be in. They should be more of 3-4 starters, and that's what I see in a lot of this rotation. Fetty probably a 3, Palante probably a 3 or a 4, McGreevy a 3 or a 4, Michaelis a 7, but he's there.
How did you view Jose Quintana last year?
I don't know what his numbers ended up, but I always view Quintana as like a number 3 or 4.
He was a number 3 on a playoff team. I think that you could get similar production this year from Andre Palante to what Jose Quintana was last year. And the reason I think that is because they were almost identical pitchers last year. In fact, by the under-the-radar stuff, like the under-the-hood numbers, Palante was better last year than Jose Quintana, just straight up. His ERA was 3.8, which is the exact same as what Jose Quintana's was. For those that are interested in this stuff, his expected ERA was 3.3. Jose Quintana last year was at 4.5. So I think we're underselling the upside of Andre Palante because he doesn't have swing and miss stuff. And we just always undersell because it's harder to be good this way. But Palante appears to be a potential outlier in the way that he pitches because his sinker is so good and he found a way to even make it better last year by the pitches that it plays off of. He is on the ground like 70% of the time. It's one of the highest rates in Major League Baseball. And the best place to be as a pitcher is on the ground. Soft hit on the ground. If you can do that, you can have success over time. And Palante has been that basically since the moment that he came up to the big leagues. He had problems with right-handed hitters, and last year he solved some of those problems. So if you've got a number 1 starter in Sonny Gray, maybe underqualified, but a number 1 nonetheless. Number 2 starter in Eric Fetty, underqualified, but a number 2 nonetheless. And then Andre Palante, I think, can slide in as a number 3. And then Michael McGreevy can slide in as a number 4. If Quinn Matthews, who I think is one of the most important Cardinals for the 2025 season, I might have him at number 1 on our list that we do prior to spring training. If that guy comes in and is as good as expected, you could have a legit 1 through 5 with Sonny, Quinn Matthews, and then all of the guys that we just mentioned.
Hold on. We are not just going to pass over the fact that your number 1 most important Cardinals is a dude who might not even be here until June or July.
Yeah, he might be the most important Cardinal on the team. You need to develop a star. You need to develop one on the pitching side of things and one on the hitting side of things. So
Maybe
I think
two on the
Walker
hitting
will
side.
probably be my number one player, but Quinn Matthews will be in my top 5 probably.
Are we going to be judging this off of what the expectations are for the year or the development of their team for the future?
I'm looking this year differently at my top 20 most important Cardinals. My top 20.
You want to let us in on your secret, though? So, like, we have the... Because if I come into this and have Wilson Contreras as my number one, everyone's going to laugh at me.
I don't view him that way this year. I think for the Cardinals this year, the goal is not to win the World Series. For the first time in a long time. The goal this year is not for them to win the World Series.
Oh,
The
I
goal,
didn't know that was
I think the goal last year should have been not to win the World
fair,
Series.
but they were like trying to win, right? The number
make the
one
playoffs.
priority was to be a good team for 2024, and we'll worry about 2025 when we get there. I think the number one priority for 2025 is to see who's going to be here in 2026. And so in order to be the best team in 2026, you need Quinn Matthews to be good. So that's, for me, the way that I'm kind of evaluating this season. It could be wrong. I understand if anybody else views it differently. But
I get it.
Based on what their public statements have been, I think they're kind of
Mo
viewing
wants
it
to be
that way.
competitive.
I just like to have him over like a Jordan Walker or a Nolan Gorman or a Lars Nootbaar. I mean, I like it.
Walker will probably be number one for me.
But don't you take it back now.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if you wanted to make the case for Quinn Matthews, I could get it.
Yeah.
If you thought, hey, we've seen now Walker's not going to be the star that we made him out to be whenever he first came up to the big leagues, I think T-Bone might make this case. Quinn Matthews still has that ability. Quinn Matthews led minor league baseball last year in strikeouts, and he went straight through the system, like into the year at AAA. After starting the year, I think in high A, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
That is a crazy jump from high A all the way up to AAA, and was good at every single level that he pitched in. That's the kind of guy this team's been missing, man. He could be the best internal pitcher that they have developed since Jack Flaherty. That's meaningful. It's been more than 5 years since they developed Jack Flaherty through their system. All right. He's Alex. That's T-Bone. I'm BK. I feel like we accomplished a lot there. Cardinals pitching. Maybe, possibly, potentially going to be a little better than expected.
I'd
Probably
be
not.
shocked if they end up being top 12 in the yard reports. Truly shocked.
I'll
Like,
put
you
him-
knocked my socks off.
I'll
I'm
put
wearing
him at-
snow boots today.
You got socks on under your snow boots?
Yeah, dude. It's
You're
cold
wearing snow
outside.
boots?
Yeah.
I am too, man.
I
had
got
to
regular
trek
boots
through
on.
some
Those
snow.
aren't snow boots.
Yeah,
Those
they are, man.
leather.
They are. They're snow boots because they got waterproofing
Get the hell out
inside.
of me.
They're snow boots.
Coming up next, we're diving into the junk drawer here on 101 ESPN. All right, let's dive into the junk drawer. Alex, what do you got for us today?
All right, I want to preface what I'm about to say as don't get mad, I'm not upset. Okay? I was shoveling the driveway yesterday.
You're definitely upset.
No,
I don't
I'm
know
not.
what you're about to say, but whatever it is, you're about to be upset.
I'm genuinely curious, and I know we've got people that listen.
You had to put a pre-warning on it?
No, I am.
Probably mad.
But because I always complain on the junk drawer, and I don't want this to come off like I'm complaining. So I'm shoveling yesterday, go out after our show, and I got to clear the driveway because obviously I got to get out of the house.
Sure. And that sucked.
Yes, it did. And it sucked even more because as I'm shoveling the driveway, they had plowed our street by this time, which was awesome. Like, MoDOT, incredible job in Jefferson County. Like, shout out.
Okay.
But when you're snow plowing...
Yeah, I knew what was coming next after you said that.
I'm genuinely curious. Do they think when they're plowing the street, boy, I am screwing these people over in terms of their driveway?
I mean, what are they supposed to do? Come up into your driveway and plow for you in your driveway?
It'd be nice if you just stop and just push a little bit. No, because I went out and like the driveway I had put salt down, so it wasn't ice. It was just packed snow, which was easy, but like it was flat. And then you get to the end of the driveway, and it was up to my chest. And I'm like, oh.
I think their thought is, hey, man, you should have gone out there earlier in the day and plowed if you didn't want this to happen.
Totally. I mean, I get that. And then here's the other thing.
I'm not telling you you're in the wrong here.
No,
you got stuff to do in the morning. I get it. I didn't do it yesterday until like 5 o'clock.
I appreciate them because, like, typically they don't do the streets. It's like you get the main roads and then you get to them.
Ours was not done until this morning.
Wow. Yeah, I mean,
they were plowing when I left my house this morning. They did our main street, but we live in a cul-de-sac. Our cul-de-sac was not plowed until this morning.
Everything was plowed yesterday afternoon, like streets. Like, shout out to the MoDOT in the Jefferson County area because it was clear.
They didn't.
Yeah, but
they didn't get our street, and the exit in St. Charles from 94 onto 70 was a bleeping disaster. An absolute failure.
I heard 141 was a disaster also, but I didn't take 141, so
I can't remember what it is. Something to St. Charles over by me. You know they forgot to do one because when I drove by this morning, you know, everything is snowplowed except for the exit ramp onto that highway. All it said was road closed. And just a bunch of snow there.
Here's the other one.
Somebody on the text line, by the way, I believe, based on this text, is a snowplower. They said, dude, I feel terrible at blocking driveways, but I have to tell myself it's for the greater good that I get this street cleared. I'm so sorry that happened.
No, I appreciate what they do, but it's just like if I was that person, I would feel horrible. Like, I know you need your street, but this is going to suck when you wake up. Here's the other one, too, though. This happened last year where I cleared off my entire driveway, cleared out everywhere. But while I'm clearing it, you know, you're obviously shoveling it to the side. It piled up next to my mailbox. And they plow it to where there's this big barrier from the road to the mailbox. And the post office was pissed. They left a note, be like, you have to clear this area. And it's like, I just got done doing this, and now I got to clear my mailbox away?
Yeah, dude.
It's like, oh, my gosh.
From the 618, I'm plowing snow right now, and if there's someone who I don't like or that badmouthed me at one time, I will absolutely plow them in.
That is
Alex.
Yeah, I like that guy.
Tip your snowplow people, tip your mail people around Christmas time, and tip your trash people around Christmas time because they will take care of you.
Somebody else from the 618. Yes, Alex, I plow for the city. I do feel bad about putting snow in a clean driveway most of the time, but it has to go somewhere. Yeah. That is the way it is.
It's like my neighbor and I were talking about this because he was doing the same thing I was, and he's like, it's like, I wonder if they think about that. Be like, I got to clean the street, but like that one house, because we're in a cul-de-sac, so I'm the middle one. So like they go around a turn, and all of it is just pushed right next to the driveway and the mailbox. And it's like, man, I appreciate that the street's clear, but this is going to suck. I was out there for 3.5 hours.
You guys sore today?
Surprisingly, no.
I just had to do a small parking spot because when I got to my apartment complex.
How long did it take you for that?
Not very long.
Okay, I thought...
Dude, my driveway took me 3.5 hours. I went back inside, and Katie and the girls were eating dinner.
I didn't do the whole parking lot. I just did one spot, and most of it was, like you said, it just compacts snow. Now, when you got to the bottom, that first wave of the storm came...
first layer. Oh,
but
God.
I felt kind of bad because what happened was when I got there, they were basically wrapping up my roads because the apartment complex is one who cleaned off the roads, but they hadn't touched the parking spots yet, and it was like above my tire. So I had to get out and shovel snow just to park my car. Well, I had to park off on the side because I can't get over a lot. And the guy was getting upset at me because he's trying to plow the road. I'm like, dude, I'm home. I got to get a parking spot. Yeah. Give me like I don't know what it was, 30 minutes just to clear this off. And now someone probably took my parking spot. I'm going to have to shovel a new one today.
Yeah, I did the initial layer of snow, which was super easy because you just kind of like pushed it with the shovel. Yeah. That first layer was good, but then it was like, so I had like
the stuff underneath.
Got to get down.
Did you get the surprise on the second layer? Because, I did that first layer and I'm like, man, this is easy. Boom, boom, boom. I hit that second one.
Oh, no, there was no surprise. I knew that second layer. I saw the ice and I'm like,
Thank God for a snowblower. It was the first time I've used it. We got it for a wedding gift back in 2021. Yeah. It was the first time that we've really had to use it.
You know what I used? And this probably isn't good what I used. You know those tools that they're flat and you just use them to even out the ground? I don't know what they're called. It's like a big metal square and then you just kind of squat the ground and it levels out the ground. I used it on the ice. So before I started shoveling, I just walked through my drive. I was like, and then it was like, this will be easy. And it wasn't. It was just chunks of ice at that point. Yeah. I hate snow, by the way.
I love it.
It's good.
There's more snow coming Friday.
I don't like, what? There's more?
Yeah, like 1 to 3 inches, I think.
Okay. Is there ice with it or is it just snow?
I think it's just snow.
The ice is what sucks.
Yeah, the ice.
The snow's fine.
That second layer was awful.
You know what's funny? You know where it's coming from? Texas.
The snow is coming from
There's
Texas?
supposed to be a big snowstorm in like the Dallas
Texas
area.
panicking right now?
They're screwed.
Yeah.
Because they have nothing in the budget for plowing.
Snow.
That's the problem. Like, people from the north, I've got friends.
Now you're taking shots at the elves from the North Pole. Unbelievable, man.
They come down from Wisconsin. They're like, oh, you guys, you don't know what a real snowstorm is. No. You know why? You know why we're unprepared for the kind of snow that you get in Wisconsin? Because we don't get that kind of snow here. We don't. It doesn't get as cold as it does up there. We don't get the snow that you get up there. So, yeah, when it snows like this, it's going to take some time. Yeah. Because we don't have it in the budget the way you guys do, where you have 20 of these a year and you've got, like, the exact routes ready to go. Come on, man. Give us a little bit of time.
By the way, shout out to all you people that are out there snow plowing because I was listening to the news this morning. These people are like doing like 12-hour shifts of just in their car snow plowing.
Somebody on the text line or YouTube, Alex, bacon wrapped wiener.
Oh, he's here.
He's officially
here
in the YouTube chat.
We don't know.
Why is my face their profile picture?
Well, there's multiple of those in there now.
Yeah. We don't know. Maybe bacon wrapped wiener is somebody that just enjoys bacon on their hot dogs.
That's right. YouTube.com/101 ESPN STL is where you can go, as always, to watch us. The Air Alliance team powers those cams. Coming up in about 15 minutes, who's the number one player that cannot lose playing time this year if Arenado ends up being back? Who's the guy that has to have that space cleared out for him? We'll talk about that in 15 minutes. But next, how's the offseason expectations change for the Illinois Fighting Illini after they've returned like every starter on their roster? We'll talk about it. T-Bone's got some thoughts next here on 101 ESPN. All right, so it's been a good offseason for the Illinois Fighting Illini. We'll get to that here in just a moment, but a little bit of breaking news. This comes from Adam Schefter. He says, one day after the Bears sought permission from the Cowboys to interview Mike McCarthy for their vacant head coaching job, Dallas has still not responded to Chicago's request.
See you, Mikey.
It's interesting there. There's a couple of reasons why they wouldn't respond. One, they're not going to allow him to interview for that job, and they have every intention to re-sign Mike McCarthy to a contract extension. That is one possible scenario, and if you're a well-run franchise, I could totally see how that would be how this plays out. Or two, they don't know what's going to happen, and they want to buy themselves some time right now because they've got one more week of exclusive negotiating rights with Mike McCarthy, and they're going to use that week to figure out if Mike McCarthy is going to be their head coach long-term or not. And in the meantime, hey, we're ghosting Chicago. They can talk to him in a week. But for now, we are the only ones that can talk to Mike McCarthy, and that is not changing anytime. So that is the news in the NFL. What do you guys make of that before we get to the Illinois Fighting Illini in their offseason?
I got to think that they already have something in front of Mike McCarthy that's like, this is what we'll offer you, and figure out from there. You've got time to decide on it. But I wonder if they're doing their own research of other coaches now, too.
Maybe.
Like if you're Dallas, like I know what I'm going to. I mean, Jerry Jones has been talking about keeping Mike McCarthy around for the last 4 weeks. They know what they're going to offer him, and they're probably not going anywhere far or anywhere upping the price from that. So that's what the deal is, and it's a matter of, Mike, do you want it? And if not, we got to start looking at what our secondary options are.
I'd be fascinated to see what their coaching list would look like. Like who could? There would be 2 lists probably. One that Jerry Jones has of like, we're going to go hire Ben Johnson, and 2 of realistic candidates that wants to work with Jerry Jones, who does a press conference availability after every game and serves as the general manager and said yesterday on the radio he's never giving that opportunity up. So
Kellen Moore's got to be on that list, right?
That's the first name
after being the offensive coordinator.
Sure.
Like they got to be like, look, Mike, this
they
is
let him go though.
You know, it would be
maybe because Mike didn't want him. Maybe they liked him and Mike didn't want him, and now it's like, okay, well, Mike, this is our offer. We're not giving you any more. If you want to take it, otherwise we're going else.
Let's just be honest. It's going to be Jason Garrett again.
Oh, God, they're bringing him back.
I honestly, for all of us, I hope that's the case because he is god-awful on those Sunday night things. They have way too many people as a part of the show. Anyways, we don't have to talk about that. So Illinois finished the season as the 20th ranked team in the country, 1 spot behind our beloved Missouri Tigers, Alex. They did not have those kinds of expectations coming into this year, though. 9-win season, pretty damn good for Illinois. 10 wins now after winning their bowl game against South Carolina, game that I said they had no chance in. Timon, they have now been able to retain 18 of their 22 offensive and defensive starters for the 2025 season. That includes almost all of the important ones. Like one of them was a guy that had no eligibility remaining, one of their top receivers. How is this going to play into your expectations for next year? Like, are we talking college football playoff or bust? Are we saying, like, hey, the expectation is to just follow up the 9-win season with another 9-win season? How is this offseason going to influence your expectations for Illinois heading into next year?
I don't know, and it sounds weird. I don't know if I view it as playoff or bust. I think it is 9-win season or bust with the hope that maybe you get that one surprise and become a playoff team. Because like I'm looking at their schedule for 2025 and like Ohio State.
Western Illinois, Western Michigan, and at Duke.
Yeah, Duke could be a tougher one than we expect. They landed a pretty good quarterback in the transfer portal. So, like, that Duke game is one that I kind of circle as, okay, this might tell you if they will become a team that has playoff hopes. And then it just depends on, like, when you look at the rest of their schedule, Ohio State, that's probably a loss at home. But it is at home, which helps.
Yeah, that's a loss.
Then whoa.
I mean, come on.
Whoa.
He's not wrong.
But then I look at it, it just depends on, like, do you believe in Lincoln Riley having that bounce-back year with USC? Does he get that program to what he had when he had Caleb Williams next year? Because if he does, then okay, that's probably a loss as well. What is Indiana next year? Because that's a road game. If they are really going to be this kind of a program under Kurt, why am I drawing a blank on his last name?
Ferentz?
Menifee?
Indiana head coach? Kurt Cignetti.
Oh, Cignetti.
Cignetti, thank you.
I didn't know what you were
I
saying.
thought you were talking about Iowa.
No.
I thought you were talking just Kurtz.
I'm not worried about Iowa. But it depends on how you view that Indiana program, right? If you think this is who they are, okay, well, then that's a challenge. And now you look at it and you go, man, there's 4 pretty tough games on the Fighting Illini schedule, along with at Wisconsin, who's always going to be tough, 8-win program there under Luke Fickell. I think
win one of them.
I think if you win one of those, that's where you get to the part where I'm talking about okay, now you are a 9-win team. And that's why I don't know if I look at them as a playoff or bust caliber of a season. It's about as close as I think Bielema's going to get the program to having one of those. But I don't think it's like where it was for Mizzou. Because when I think back to Missouri's season or expectations coming into the season, it was twofold, right? Returning most of the offensive starters on what was a really good offense the year prior, but also a very easy SEC schedule compared to most, where you only had the two big swing games.
There's a third piece to that. Also, Luther Burden. You had a superstar.
Sure.
And that's the piece that I don't think Illinois has, necessarily. You can correct me if I'm wrong, T-Bone, but I don't think you have your Luther Burden.
I think they're losing them from this year.
And he wasn't even Luther
he's
Burden,
like a
not to the same
third-round
degree. Burden was a potential top 10 pick in the NFL draft. Now, he had an underwhelming season this year, understood, but he was a top 5 prospect that picked you. Final year at your school, you have a third-year starter at quarterback, and you've got the dude at wide receiver. So that's the piece of the puzzle that would, in my opinion, elevate Illinois from 9-win expectations, like you're saying, to, okay, it's college football playoff or bust. And I don't think they have that piece. And I don't think they landed one of those in the portal either. I'm not sure one was available, frankly, but that would have been what put them over the top. What I think you have now entered is Brett Bielema is trying to build his program at Illinois the way that he had it at Wisconsin. Wisconsin wasn't typically like hey, we're going to the college football playoff this year. No, they're going to win 8 or 9 games. And they're going to be consistent in that regard. They're going to be a really tough out every time you go up against them. Like next year, when you play against Wisconsin, you should expect to have a chance in that game. Previously, Illinois would not have expected to have a chance in that game, going on the road to Camp Randall. So I think that's where you're at as a program right now. And, man, that's a damn good place to be. Like, you have stability. You believe in your head coach. He has brought some consistency. You didn't lose your starters to the portal, which is something that Illinois in the past, if you had that kind of a season, it probably would have. So I think you're in a really good spot right now. And Mizzou, for what it's worth, I think they have pretty similar expectations to Illinois. Get yourself to 9-3. Yeah. Have another season where you feel good about it. You're building that foundation of not just, okay, that was your one chance and now it's over. The Fastlane, I remember a few weeks ago, they had the conversation of like, was this the all-in year and it gets worse from here? Or is this the start of them building a sustainable model for their program? I think it's the latter. They said the former. We're about to find out. And that's what this season's going to be for Eli Drink. What's that, Mizzou?
And I think the thing that's nice about the 9-3 feeling, whether it be both for Missouri and for Illinois, but I'm looking more at the Illinois perspective, is if you are that 9-win program, you can see the path to the playoff, right? Now, it probably takes two things, is one surprise win on the schedule that you're not looking at. So whether that's the Ohio State, USC, at Indiana, at Wisconsin, at Duke, one of those games. And then maybe one of these teams on the schedule that I just referenced doesn't have that kind of a year, right? Like when I got tickets to that Illinois-Michigan game last year, my expectation was Michigan's still going to be a pretty good team. They lost Harbaugh. That's probably still a team that's a 9-10 win playoff hopeful. That didn't happen. They were a barely bowl eligible football team.
The difference is you have your coach back. They didn't.
Sure, but what I'm saying is you need one of those. Maybe you need one of those teams to happen on your schedule this year.
Oh, I see what you're
like
saying.
Maybe Wisconsin's a team that I'm looking at right now, going, man, that's probably a tough game. You're in that conversation. They're probably an 8-9 win team.
I think
maybe
Indiana's
that falls out
probably
and they're
most
6-6.
likely to be that team.
Sure,
like
100%.
they had a huge season. They had a bunch of transfers that followed Cignetti to Indiana, and they had a really good quarterback as well. And then next year, you don't get those same results. Maybe it's a little bit of a step back before they then push forward in 2026.
And I think that's the path for Illinois. Is you got to pick up that one surprise win while also living up to your expectations of 9 wins. Pick up that one surprise win and also probably have one team that ends up falling off from what their expectations were.
That's Tanner Hendrickson. He's Alex Ferrario, and I'm Brandon Kiley. In 15 minutes, we'll get to our football pick'em reveal. It was our final week in this month's pick'em. We'll tell you who ended up winning and who ended up losing in our pick'em challenge for the month of December. That's in 15 minutes or so. But coming up next, who's the number one player for you that cannot lose playing time in 2025 if Nolan Arenado returns to the lineup? We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN. Alex, when we look to the college football playoff, I've got Notre Dame and Ohio State advancing to the college football national championship. And the place where I'm going to bet on that is over on the Circa Sports app in the state of Illinois. And there's a reason for it. It's because when I bet with them and I win more money than with some of their competitors. For example, we talk about the minus 110 splits, right? That's something that they pride themselves on, is having that available. If you bet on Ohio State or Notre Dame minus the points, you get a minus 110 split on those. Well, over on FanDuel, Ohio State is minus 118. Now, why does that matter? If I were to parlay these two games together, bet $100 on them. Over on FanDuel, I win $255 if I win. If I win that exact same bet on Circa, it's $265. I'm just winning more money with Circa. That's why we bet with them exclusively.
You're doing that too because they're not keeping money compared to other large market bets that you're putting together. You know me, I like to do those big parlays. Circa Sports, they're keeping as little money as possible on those big large market bets. The tight money line splits that BK mentioned. Heck, I'll give you one for tonight. Blues, Minnesota Wild. I'm taking the Blues straight up on the puck line, and I'm also taking the under at 5.5. You put those together, better odds with that parlay than any other sports book that you'll find out there. So download the Circa Sports app today. If you or someone may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
Have to keep reminding everyone a lot of time left to see what this roster is going to shake out. But on a very high level, I think it's about creating opportunity for some of these young players and see really what we have. And, time will tell what we really look like over the next 6 weeks. But then you also have 6 weeks of spring training. So, you add it all up, it's 3 months before opening day, really. And hopefully we end up having a product we're excited about.
That is what John Mozeliak had to say on KMOX on Sunday, Alex, updating where the team is at right now and basically saying, hey, we still got some time here, but it's getting early fast out there for the St. Louis Cardinals. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Nolan Arenado is once again in the news, in the headlines, and one of the reasons why is because of two stories that were posted over the last couple of days. Really, three stories. One started out with the Boston Report. Boston reporters up there for MassLive.com said that Nolan Arenado's preferred destination is to go to the Boston Red Sox. Then John Denton last night followed that up by saying the Red Sox have emerged as a strong contender to land Nolan Arenado via trade. He then added a couple of caveats, though. He said that this could be contingent on St. Louis swallowing a sizable chunk of the money still owed to the third baseman and Boston finding a way to deal first baseman Tristan Casas for value. That's a lot that has to happen before we get to a place that Nolan Arenado is actually dealt to the Red Sox. Katie Woo then added a little bit of context to this as well, saying she's not totally sure that the Red Sox are out of the Alex Bregman sweepstakes. And up until that point happens, they ain't trading for Nolan Arenado. So we'll see. We're in a wait-and-see pattern here for Arenado, for Bregman, for the Red Sox to see what's going on. Let's go down a path that I don't think anybody wants to go down for the Cardinals this year, especially the organization. Say Arenado's back, and they can't find a suitor for him. He nixed the deal to the Astros. Dodgers aren't interested in him, and the Red Sox either sign Alex Bregman or decide, you know what, we're just going to leave Devers at third base. We're going to go ahead and kind of run this thing back. We'll see where we're at by midseason. In that scenario, Alex, who is the number one guy for you that cannot lose playing time? Because Arenado's going to take up 500 plate appearances, 500 at-bats at third base. He's going to play every day for the Cardinals. There's no getting around that. Somebody will end up losing playing time as a result. Probably multiple players. Who's the guy that even if Arenado is back, you say, you still have to find out what you have here, though. This cannot affect what you were planning to do with X, Y, or Z.
Nolan Gorman. Nolan Gorman for me. And I don't know how much it'll affect the at-bats because it seemingly would say that he's just going to become your everyday second baseman, but I don't want it to come down to what last year was, where he struggles and you're like, well, we need to put Donovan in the lineup and Burleson's batting the lineup, so we'll move him to DH or we'll put him on the bench, or maybe, God forbid, they send him to the minors, which I don't expect to happen. But, man, for me, it's got to be Nolan Gorman. That guy can't lose any at-bats. He should be playing every single game from start to finish with the season, because if I'm the Cardinals, he's priority number 2 of who I got to figure out if you're somebody that can help my team moving forward. Are you a cornerstone piece? Are you a complementary piece? Or are you just a home run or bust type of player? So he's the one for me. It's kind of like a tie for first, though, because another one comes to mind, but I won't steal him. Nolan Gorman probably has that edge, though.
Yeah, Gorman's definitely up on that list, but to go a little different from that one, and this is probably who BK has on for him, is Alec Burleson. You know, I don't really want to see Burleson lose at-bats, and I still think the jury is out on what he truly is as a player. We have a better idea because we saw last year, but, you know, you look at his stats last year, that first half was awesome. From an 814 OPS, he's 27% above league average, and then the second half hits where he has a 626 OPS, and he ends up being 22% below league average. So the jury is still out on what Alec Burleson is as a player. Did the league figure something out on Burley, or was that, hey, it's his first full big league season, now the body's starting to wear down a little bit, maybe now he's more adjusted to it? But it's hard to envision him getting at-bats when I've got Nootbaar and Walker in the outfield with whoever the center fielder is. If Arenado is here, and then you've got Gorman at second, well, then Donovan's going to be serving as the, whether you want to call him utility or the DH guy. It's just hard to see where the at-bats are coming for Alec Burleson, and he's a guy that I still want to see what he truly is through a full 162.
So this is going to sound strange when I say it, because it's not a player that should be directly affected by Nolan Arenado, but I agree with yours. I think those are really good. Gorman would have been my number 1 pick, but if I'm going to go different, Ivan Herrera. Because Ivan Herrera is going to get a decent number of his opportunities at DH. And in order for Gorman to get those at-bats that you're talking about, Alex, I think he's probably going to have to spend a decent amount of time at the DH next year. Because if you just go down the lineup, like Nootbaar, I think is going to be your everyday left fielder, no questions asked. Walker, I think is going to be your everyday right fielder, no questions asked. I think Arenado will be at third base. I think Gwynn will be at shortstop. I think Donovan will be your everyday second baseman, and then Contreras at first base. That will be the starting lineup when you have your A group out there. That puts Gorman at DH, which means you've got a decision every day on Herrera versus Pages behind the plate. We know how this team leans. They lean towards defense. And what could end up happening in this scenario is you have Pages starting 2, Ivan Herrera starting 1. So he's playing 1 out of every 3 days, which means he finishes the season with, let's call it 65 to 70 games played as like legit 3 at-bats or more in that game, not just coming in for a pinch hit situation. That's not enough. That is not even close to enough for a guy with his kind of potential, not only behind the plate, but just as a bat. Ivan Herrera has one of the highest ceiling. He might have the highest ceiling of any player right now on this roster as a hitter. The dude hit 300 last year and hit almost 300 in his first opportunity a couple of years ago. Maybe.
See, I would put him. He's up there on the list. I would put him.
Oh, I'm
third.
not disagreeing. I wouldn't have him.
Had more production in the minor leagues than any of the guys that you guys are going to mention.
I'm not disagreeing with that. That's bad for the Cardinals if it's higher than Jordan Walker.
I don't know, dude. Ivan Herrera could hit 300 with 25 home runs at the major league level. That's in his range of outcomes. And that's what we're hoping for from Jordan Walker. So I think the value for Walker is he's adding that along with base running, along with defense potentially in right field. Like, his total package is more than what you can have from Ivan Herrera.
Herrera's mostly a bat.
Yeah, he's probably long-term going to be mostly a DH.
Yeah.
But you don't have the DH slot open if Nolan Gorman is there on most days. So regardless of how we feel on Herrera versus Walker versus Gorman, whatever, who has the highest potential as a hitter, you want to find out. This is the year to find out on those guys. Those are the 3 players in particular you have got to get answers on this season. And if Arenado is back, the guy that I think is most at risk of actually losing those at-bats is Ivan Herrera. Because I think they agree with you, Alex. I think Gorman will get those at-bats as a designated hitter. I think Burleson is way down on this list, and that really sucks. Like, Burleson and Herrera are the 2 guys that I'm most worried about what happens to their plate appearances if Nolan Arenado is back next year.
That's terrible for the team then. Like what I said earlier, you got to find a way to get this Arenado thing done, because that's you're not meeting what the goals you set for this team if you go down that path.
See, and I don't disagree with that. The thing that is frustrating about that is the Herrera one is the easiest to fix of these, right? you start him at catcher.
Yeah, just play him.
For 2 out of 3 games, right? It shouldn't be we've got to go with Herrera and Pages kind of 50-50. No, if you want, who has the higher upside? Like, they should ask themselves this question. Now, you can figure out the defense a little bit later on, because look how long it took Contreras to get a defensive catcher, right? Like, I think the hope is you have the next Wilson Contreras and Ivan Herrera. Does that seem fair?
How'd that work out?
Well,
where's Contreras playing this year?
Well, I didn't. I said he could be a first baseman at some point.
Sure. At least he's not in the outfield.
But the reason why I say this, T-Bone, is because they didn't value Contreras as a catcher. In fact, this year, they have him playing first base. Now, they would tell you that's because they want to see what the young guys can do. I would tell you it's because they don't trust his defense behind the plate. Otherwise, they would have him behind the plate. Let's just be honest here.
How about coach him up so he can play behind the plate?
They tried that, and they clearly view it as it's just not coachable. Like, he can't be a catcher long term. Whatever.
Think they want to take the easier path and just use Pedro Pages behind the plate.
I do too, because of his defense.
And
they view the defense and game calling as something that is really important behind the plate, and I think they learned that lesson the hard way because they thought they wanted the offense, and then they realized very quickly, oh no, this is not what we actually wanted to have behind the plate. So the reason why I bring that up, to bring it full circle on Ivan Herrera, I think they might do that same thing again. And this is me getting pre-mad, but
it's okay. In
that scenario where they turned to Pages over Ivan Herrera, his at-bats are very limited. And if you want Nolan Gorman to get all those at-bats, there's one way you can make this stuff work. It's by moving Donovan to the outfield, putting him in left field, putting Nootbaar in center field. Now, your defense is not as good in the outfield, but a lot of their issues come back to the main thing that we have talked about for years. They prioritize defense, man. And they prioritize it.
And this is my biggest complaint about that, and I think I said this when it was you and me a few weeks ago. You just did the whole defense's priority this past offseason, this past season, and your team was bad. How about you actually take a different mindset and don't prioritize defense and prioritize the offense? Because you just lived the whole, Michael Ciani's an incredible defender, and we need to keep him in center field. And we need Pedro Pages behind the plate because our defense. And where did that get you? Did it get you to the playoffs? No. You don't have Yadier Molina in your system. You don't have Harrison Bader anymore.
You know who's valuing defense, though? The Brewers. They put a real premium on it.
They're going to say Marmol.
No, him too, but I think a lot of good teams value the defense.
That's fine.
This is where
you could find both.
And this is where I find that they are stuck, and it's this entire conversation is, what is the goal of 2025, right? Because, everything that we just said about what you said, we'll put Nootbaar in center, we'll put Herrera behind the play so he gets his at-bats. Man, they are going to stink defensively. Yeah. But you know what? We're going to get answers on guys.
Yep.
And you're going to find out the most important part about what wins baseball, or about what wins baseball games in the long run. Offense. Who can hit at the big league level? That's what you'll find out. And if the answer is, you know what, Nootbaar can't stay healthy, even when we put him in center field, and Nootbaar's even said publicly he thinks he can stay healthier in center field. All right, well, Nootbaar, he's not on this team. We can figure out that spot later on. You know what, Gorman, he can't hit at the big league level. You know what, we've got a second baseman in Brendan Donovan. Now we have answers. Oh, Herrera, yeah, he stinks behind the plate, but hell, he can hit the baseball. We have a spot at everyday DH for him. We'll just Pages, you know what, we'll have a defensive-minded catcher. But if you're going to view it as we need to win baseball games in 2025, you convince yourself of some of these conversations. And that's why I am interested to know where Ollie Marmol will fall with the Cardinals, because it's kind of what we talked about with Bannister, right? And it's not so much with Ollie, because Ollie, I don't think, has to prove himself anymore. No. But Bannister got true. Bannister had to prove himself as an NHL head coach. So what happens? He pulls out the young guys, and you don't establish what you wanted to do in a retool. Granted, they thought they were a playoff team. They bring in Montgomery anyways. What is Ollie Marmol's goal for 2025?
It's a fair question.
Is it, hey, I need to win ball games to keep my job when Chaim Bloom takes over and he can see that I'm a good manager and that I'm the guy for him since he's taken over? Or is it, hey, I've got leeway for I've got another 2-3 years under my belt in the future. I can use this season to find out what I have on the roster, just like Chaim Bloom can find out and Mo can find out.
I think if you want to stay in St. Louis, you got to find a way to do both. And I know that's like an impossible task, but guess what? Drew Bannister had to do it. And it didn't work because there was somebody
right now?
Somebody on the text
Where's
line.
Berube right
but
now?
Somebody out there was better that could do both.
Somebody on the text line brought up, hey guys, where did the Cardinals rank last year in defense, and how did that end up working out for them? If you look at defensive runs saved, they were 13th in Major League Baseball last year, plus 29. If you looked at outs above average, they were 8th. Regardless of the metric, they were good. They were a good defensive club last year because they put emphasis on it. Like you look in center field, they put an obvious emphasis on a guy that is out there purely for his glove. They had one of the worst OPS pluses ever by any team from a center field position. That was the Cardinals last year because of how much they prioritize defense. So that is something to keep in mind as we're talking about what they're going to do. I don't think they would put Lars Nootbaar in center field. Maybe they will, but I would bet against it going into next season because of their actions in the past. And that makes things really difficult to make things work if they do have Nolan Arenado on the roster, which all gets back to the point that we made in the open today, which is you can't have Nolan Arenado on this roster on opening day. You just can't. You've got to find a way to make this thing work with him going somewhere else. And it sounds like Boston is the most likely landing spot. All right. For Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Coming up next, we'll give you our football pick'em reveal for the final week of the regular season. That's next here on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here, the Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Blues back in action tonight as they visit the Minnesota Wild, and we'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario, then puck drop at 7 o'clock with the voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber. This Sports Update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
All right, it was our final week of the football pick'em for this regular season. It was our final month of the year. We'll still give you our picks in the playoffs, but it won't be specifically for a pick'em challenge or anything. There's a punishment associated with this one. I believe it's the kiddie pool, right? Mm-hmm. Got to do the kiddie pool outside for a few minutes. Oh boy, don't want to do that
now.
I still got to do mine.
Don't want to do that.
Guess I got to purchase a blow-up, though.
Yeah, we got to do that.
I don't want that on my card.
Yeah,
So,
BK, you're buying that one.
Going into the final week, all Alex had to do was get a pick correct, and he was in the clear. So it was an easy week for him. But me and T-Bone were 1 point apart, so it was really tight between the two of us to see who was going to be punished. Let's start with Alex's pick for the week. We begin with his 1 point play.
I'm going to T-Bone's Rams team because still something to play for, taking on the Seattle Seahawks, and I like the Rams at plus 6.5.
Do you want me to tell him, or do you want to tell him?
I'll tell them because it is my team. They will not be playing any of their starters this week. Sean McVay says, seating's on the line. I don't care. It's better for me to go in completely healthy. That's why I don't like the Rams winning
Fine by me. I'll have to keep it close, 6.5.
All right.
Second and goal. Garoppolo fake to Rivers, rolling right to the end zone. It is caught for a touchdown by Tyler Johnson.
Never doubt Jimmy G.
Unbelievable. They end up covering the spread. Now, they lose outright, but they cover the spread 30-25 against the Seattle Seahawks. Good for you, Alex. Good for you.
That's all I needed, man. That's all I needed. I needed the 1 point play.
Unfortunately, the rest of them didn't go quite as well.
No, they did not.
Let's get to his 2 point play.
Team that also still has something to play for because they got to worry about another team in their conference. I've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers minus 14. Home game against the Saints. You talk about giving up on a season. They literally don't have anybody that's playing worth starting. Tampa Bay, of course, needs to get that victory to keep Atlanta out of the conversation. 2-touchdown game. I like minus 14 for Tampa.
Well, welcome to my 3 point play because I have the Bucs minus 14 points. Everything that you said. They've got to play for something. Yep. The Saints aren't playing for anything. I love that.
Mayfield. Evans is doubled. Looking around. Flips it out.
Well, they did win, but hot damn was that a close one. And maybe that's why the New York Jets want to interview Rizzi, the former interim head coach with the Saints, for their head coaching vacancy. Buccaneers win 27-19. Not a particularly impressive showing out of them. I was monitoring that one all day long. That was a legitimately close game.
Yeah, you could say that the Saints had more Riz than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
That's what the kids would say.
It is what the kids say, T-Bone. You should look it up.
It took me a minute to figure out what
Not sure it totally applies in that setting, but
isn't that what Riz means?
No, charisma.
Okay, well, that didn't have charisma.
I suppose. I'm not sure it applies, but whatever. Next one up is the 3 point play. Alex, we were riding together on this one.
I'm right back home with my boy Joe Burrow. He is going to win this game on Saturday night. As a 2.5 point favorite, they will win this game by a touchdown.
Might have to change that, buddy, because that's my 3 point play.
That's all right. I don't care about you. T-Bone's the one that I need to beat.
Oh, okay. Well, everything BK said, I second.
15 seconds left. 4th down and 12. Wilson. Incomplete for Freiermuth.
I feel like we had the right read on the game. They just won by 2 instead of 3.
The Bengals they aren't that good.
So frustrating, man. They got out to such a big start, 13-7 at the half, and their offense looked really good. And then they just stunk in the second half. They were holding on for dear life. Like, they needed to luck out with Russell Wilson screwing it up at the end to even win the game outright, much less to win it by 3 or more. So frustrating way for that
That's
team
all right.
to go.
That's all right.
All right, for you.
Yeah, it was good for me, man. All I needed was that one win. Now, did the Rams game happen at the 3:25 mark? Yeah, but BK had already lost, so there was no chance of him catching me, so I was good.
Alex, you had your 1 point, so you're clear of me and T-Bone. T-Bone lost his 3 point play with the one that he seconded you on. That was the Bucs winning against the Saints by 14 or more. Let's continue with his 1-point play in the NFL.
I'm going Packers -10 against the Chicago Bears. Sounds like LaFleur's going to get his guys some series, if not play the entire game. I think they're going to play the entire game, and they're just a much better team than the Bears. The Bears are going to be that classic team that counts out in their huddle. All right, Cancun on 3. 1, 2, 3, Cancun. So Packers -10.
Good snap. Good hold. The kick on the way by Santos, and it is good. The Bears' losing streak comes to an end on the final play of the regular season.
Turns out they did not play their starters the majority of the game. Their leading passer was Malik Willis due to a bit of an injury for Jordan Love. It doesn't sound serious, but his elbow got banged up. Emmanuel Wilson was their leading rusher, and their leading receiver was Malik Heath. So looking back, maybe the Packers didn't quite go all out on this one after all.
No, but hey, good for the Bears. You know, before you go to Cancun, you leave with a win.
Just stop betting on the last week of the season.
T-Bone loses his
the real
1-point
answer.
play. He had already lost his 3-point play with Alex. Let's see what his 2-point play was able to do.
I'm going with the Washington Commanders -6 against the Cowboys. Dan Quinn says everybody's playing, and if that's the case, they are a much better football team than Dallas, and it is not as big a spread as double digits like we've had for multiple picks so far here. So I love the Commanders -6 against the Cowboys.
It's 2nd and goal. End zone shot for the lead. It's McLaurin. He's got it. Washington is in front.
Jaden Daniels was 6 for 12 for 38 yards in this game, and then he was replaced by Marcus Mariota, who actually played pretty well, but they won and did not cover the significant spread, so they won by 4.
Once again, kids, don't bet on the best game of the season.
0-for-3 this week, which opens the door for your boy BK. I came into the week down by a point. Let's see how this thing goes. Or down by 2 points, excuse me. Let's see how this thing goes with my 1-point play.
The Baltimore Ravens are a 20-point favorite.
Unbelievable.
Against the Cleveland Browns and Bailey Zappi, who is expected to start at quarterback for the Browns this weekend. I will take the Baltimore Ravens as a 20-point favorite to cover this spread. 2 of the last 3 that have been favored by 20-plus have been able to cover the spread. We'll see if the Ravens are able to add themselves to this list. I'm not exactly saying it with my chest, but I think they win.
Jackson from the pocket, lofting for the end zone. Caught. Touchdown. Andrews makes the grab.
All right.
Should have
So
said
we
it with
got
your
a 1-point
chest.
play.
Yeah, half a point.
I had already lost my 2-point play. That was the Bengals game that I went on with Alex. Very frustrating. My 3-point play was in the NFL. We had to get it right to avoid the punishment this week. T-Bone, let's get a listen.
You guys remember that Rams versus Chiefs game a few years ago? It's one of the best games that we've seen in recent memory, and the reason why is because both teams had real expectations, and there were points scored galore. That is what we will see in this game, and the Minnesota Vikings will come out victorious on the road against the Detroit Lions, proving all of us, especially myself, incorrect. Give me the Vikings +2.5.
Gibbs left. Jahmyr Gibbs accelerates into the end zone. He's got the hat trick.
T-Bone and I told you, BK. We said we don't like that play. It's a trap. Take Detroit.
He was partially right. One team did come out and play like it was the Rams.
One
Chiefs.
team did not score a lot of
forgot
points.
the Chiefs in that equation, though, because Sam Darnold.
You know what's so sweet about it, T-Bone? It's
the fact that I avoided a punishment all year.
No,
Yeah.
it came down to the last game, and BK sided with Sam Darnold, who he did not trust all year.
Yep.
And when the fate was in his own hands, he said, I'm going to go with Sam Darnold. And Sam Darnold saw ghosts, just like BK's going to be seeing ghosts.
You're correct. Everything you just said is 100% true. I'm embarrassed for myself. I've got to be better. I will be better. But for this one, I lost. I own it. I will be sitting in a kiddie pool, ice bath on
wear
the
a Sam Darnold
outside.
jersey when you do it.
No, he's wearing nothing. Well, something,
Wait,
but
put something on?
something. Although
Gotta
that
pay
would
a
be
little
fun
bit
to
more for
find
that.
out.
There's an OnlyFans account that could be started for something.
That'd be fun to find out how he handles that, you know?
Oh, God.
Congrats to T-Bone, by the way. He
I lost
avoided
this
punishment.
one, and I lost in the Fastlane Pick'em Challenge as well for 2 consecutive weeks to finish out the season. Just not clutch. I'm not
Well,
clutch.
that's just because you were dumb.
No punishments for T-Bone this year. How
I know.
about that,
You avoided them.
boys?
You got 2 and I got 2.
Not great.
Follow me when it comes to the betting, ladies
You
and gentlemen.
literally almost lost this week.
With Alex and T-Bone on BK, T-Bone went 0 for 3, still found a way not to lose. The Rewind is next here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. If you missed anything from today's show, be sure to check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, or the free 101 ESPN app. It's all presented by
Schaefer Door Company.
That 101 ESPN app is also presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. You can check us out on YouTube after the show or during the show. YouTube.com/101 ESPN STL is where you can go to find it. Those studio cams are powered by the Air Alliance team. All right, Alex, we started the show today with the biggest story here in St. Louis, which is the Cardinals attempting to trade Nolan Arenado. It sounds like the Boston Red Sox are his preferred destination. There are conflicting reports on how interested the Red Sox are, though, in Nolan Arenado. Do you think this gets done?
No.
Do you think that Nolan Arenado will end up getting traded by the end of the offseason?
I do not. I think this is a smokescreen. I think Boston, of course, is interested in Nolan Arenado, but first they need Alex Bregman to decide where he wants to go. And then if they pivot to Nolan Arenado, it's going to be fine, but you need to eat this much money. There's so many hula hoops still in this thing that they would have to jump through. I don't think this thing gets done. I think this all starts all the way back with Alex Bregman. I think they get Alex Bregman.
I think they do not get Alex Bregman. I think that they end up pivoting, and I don't know if it's the Red Sox or the Angels, but I think one of those two teams will end up with Nolan Arenado. I don't know how it gets done. I don't know if it's going to include the Cardinals having to include some kind of a sweetener to the deal, Helsley, Fetty, something like that. It's not a good spot to be in, but I think that the Cardinals will, by the end of the offseason, know we cannot go into this year with Nolan Arenado on our roster. It just doesn't make sense for what we're trying to accomplish. So I do think eventually that gets done. Our full thoughts on that can be found on the podcast page from the Open today. Alex, Blues back in action this evening. Blues up in Minnesota against the Wild. 7 o'clock puck drop. Pre-game coverage with Alex and Joey Vitale in studio tonight beginning at 6. What should people be watching for in this one?
It's going to be a tight game. I think this is going to be low scoring. I like the under in this at 5.5, but I think what you need to be watching is you need to see consistency. You need to see the compete's there. You know that. The offense has shown up. It's going to be tough against this Gustafsson, who's been very good. This is a game that I believe not a must-win, but it needs to. You need a point in this one. And they don't have Kaprizov. They don't have Jared Spurgeon. They're a little banged up. You got to take advantage of this. This has to start that winning streak for the Blues.
I think it gets started tonight. 4-2 to victory. 4-2 victory for the St. Louis Blues.
3-2 final score.
3-2 final score with an empty netter. That gets it to 4-2. That's what I've got for this one.
Blues minus 1.5.
And I think they get the win. They end up with 4 in a row. After
4 in a row.
Yep, they will win tonight. They will beat Anaheim. They'll beat Columbus, and then they'll beat Calgary, and then they'll lose that back-to-back.
I say they
Calgary.
Different again on our paths.
I say they got 5 in a row.
I think they win 2 in a row, and then they lose.
All right, we'll find out tonight. Alex will have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock. You'll hear all of that right here in your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. For Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Be safe out there as you guys are driving. Have a little bit of courtesy for your fellow drivers out there. Have a little bit of grace for everybody. We will talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. Fastlane's coming up next here on 101 ESPN.